London, 1854. Rain pattered against the windowpanes of Merryweather House as Lady Rosalind Lowell stared at her reflection in the looking-glass. 26 years of age, unmarried, and now utterly ruined. The scandal sheets had been merciless. Even now, she could recite the damning paragraph from memory. A certain Lady L, once considered the diamond of her season, has been observed in most compromising circumstances with the married Viscount P. Society matrons whisper that no gentleman of quality shall ever extend an offer to a woman so thoroughly tarnished. Rosalind's fingers trembled as she secured the last pin in her severe chignon. She had not been compromising herself with Viscount Pembroke. She had been fleeing his unwanted advances when they were discovered in the conservatory. But in the court of London society, a woman was guilty the moment whispers began. "My lady," her lady's maid, Martha, appeared in the doorway. "The carriage is ready." Rosalind nodded, adjusting the high collar of her slate-grey walking dress. "Thank you, Martha." "Are you certain about this, my lady?" "Society will be most unforgiving." "Society has already judged me, Martha. I have nothing left to lose by attending my cousin's wedding." Rosalind lifted her chin. "Besides, hiding only confirms guilt." This was the belief that had sustained her since the scandal broke 3 months ago. Maintain dignity, show no weakness, and eventually the ton would find some new victim to devour. But beneath this resolve lay a deeper conviction that had taken root in her heart since her father's death 5 years prior. Love was a luxury reserved for those whose reputations remained intact. For a woman like her, disgraced, impoverished, and dependent on the charity of relatives, love was as unattainable as the stars. The rain had ceased by the time Rosalind's carriage arrived at St. George's Church in Hanover Square. She could feel the whispers following her as she made her way to a seat at the back of the church, far from the society matrons who turned pointedly away as she passed. Did she truly have the audacity to attend? "I heard Lord Pembroke's wife has taken to her bed with melancholia. The Lowell name was once so respected. Her poor father would be devastated." Rosalind kept her gaze fixed ahead, her expression impassive despite the shame burning within her. She had learned early in her disgrace that displaying emotion only provided more fodder for gossip. The ceremony proceeded with all the pomp expected for the union of a baron's daughter and a wealthy merchant's son. Rosalind watched her cousin Charlotte, radiant in white, pledging her troth to a man who gazed at her with unmistakable adoration. A strange hollowness expanded in Rosalind's chest. Not envy, precisely, but awareness of something irretrievably lost. After the ceremony, she slipped away before the receiving line formed, avoiding the embarrassment of being snubbed by her own family. Her carriage had not yet returned, so she stood beneath the church portico, watching raindrops begin to fall once more. "Lady Lowell, I believe." Rosalind turned to find a gentleman observing her, his expression difficult to read. Tall, with striking features and eyes of the most unusual amber hue, he was impeccably dressed in a manner that spoke of wealth, but not ostentation. He was a stranger to her, which in itself was unusual in London's closed aristocratic circles. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "Forgive me, sir, but I don't believe we've been introduced." "Isaiah Montague, at your service," he bowed formally. "I arrived in London only last week, after many years abroad. I'm acquainted with the groom's family." "I see." Rosalind waited for the moment when recognition would dawn in his eyes, when he would connect her name to the scandal that had made her a pariah. But Mr. Montague merely offered a courteous smile. "Might I escort you to your carriage, Lady Lowell? The rain appears to be worsening." Before she could respond, Charlotte's mother, Rosalind's aunt by marriage, emerged from the church. Upon seeing Rosalind conversing with the distinguished-looking gentleman, her expression soured. "Mr. Montague, I see you've met my niece." Her tone carried a warning. "Perhaps you're unaware of certain circumstances." Isaiah Montague's expression remained unchanged. Lady Harwick, a pleasure. I was just offering Lady Lowell assistance with her carriage. How gallant, Aunt Harwick said with brittle politeness. But I should warn you that association with certain individuals can be detrimental to one's standing, particularly for someone newly returned to London society. Rosalind felt the familiar burn of humiliation. My carriage approaches now, Mr. Montague. Thank you for your concern, but I require no assistance. She walked away with measured steps, her back straight, refusing to betray how deeply her aunt's words had cut. This was her reality now, a cautionary tale, a woman to be avoided. As her carriage pulled away, Rosalind caught a final glimpse of Isaiah Montague still watching her, his expression thoughtful. She dismissed the encounter from her mind. Men like him, respectable, clearly of means, and untainted by scandal, belonged to a world she could no longer access. The following week brought a letter from Rosalind's last remaining patron, her father's cousin, the elderly Countess of Westmoreland. The missive was brief but devastating. My dear Rosalind, it pains me to write that circumstances no longer permit me to continue your quarterly allowance. My son insists that association with your name brings disrepute to our family. I enclose a final sum of £50 and recommend you consider a position as a companion or governess. With regrets, Lady Westmoreland. Rosalind set the letter down, her hands surprisingly steady despite the panic rising within her. £50. Perhaps 3 months of modest living in the small house she rented in a once fashionable district of London. After that, destitution awaited. Her father, the late Baron Lowell, had left his affairs in terrible disorder. His gambling debts had consumed most of the estate, leaving Rosalind with nothing but her mother's jewellery and the education befitting a nobleman's daughter, utterly impractical for earning a living. The irony did not escape her. The scandal that had destroyed her reputation was the very thing that made employment as a governess impossible. No respectable family would admit a woman of questionable virtue into their household. Desperate circumstances called for desperate measures. Among her mother's possessions was a small lacquered box containing silk threads of extraordinary quality, imported from China decades earlier. Alongside them were her mother's needlework patterns, intricate designs unlike anything commonly seen in England. Rosalind had inherited her mother's talent with a needle. Perhaps there was a way to convert this skill into sustenance. Society ladies were always eager for unique embellishments on their gowns, particularly if they could be obtained discreetly, without association with a scandalous name. A plan began to form in her mind. She would become invisible, a shadow artisan whose work would be admired while her identity remained concealed. She would survive through silence and skill alone. The following day, Rosalind donned her most sombre dress and a thick veil that obscured her features. She made her way to Bond Street, to the establishment of Madame Lefebvre, a French modiste whose clientele included the most fashionable ladies of the ton. I wish to speak with Madame Lefebvre, Rosalind told the shop assistant, her voice barely above a whisper. Madame sees clients by appointment only, the young woman replied, eyeing the veiled figure with suspicion. I am not a client. I have a business proposition. From her reticule, Rosalind withdrew a small square of ivory silk. Upon it, she had embroidered a delicate pattern of intertwined roses and ivy, embellished with minute seed pearls and silver thread. It had taken 3 days of continuous work, but the result was exquisite. The assistant's eyes widened. Wait here, madame. Moments later, a stout Frenchwoman with shrewd eyes emerged from the back of the shop. She examined the embroidery sample with expert fingers, turning it to catch the light from the window. This is exceptional work, Madame Lefebvre said finally. Who are you? My identity is not important, Rosalind replied from behind her veil. I seek an arrangement. I will provide embroidery and beadwork for your most exclusive clients. In return, you will pay me a fair price and never inquire as to my name or circumstances. Madame Lefebvre studied the veiled figure. You understand that I cannot pay what such work deserves. The arrangement you propose would give you no leverage to negotiate. I understand. And why should I agree to such mysterious terms? Perhaps you have stolen this sample. Rosalind hesitated, then said quietly, because discretion benefits us both, madame. Your clients need never know that their exquisite embellishments come from hands that society might deem unacceptable. A look of understanding crossed the Frenchwoman's face. Ah, I see. You are a lady fallen on difficult times. Will you accept my proposal? Madame Lefebvre's business sense clearly outweighed her curiosity. I will give you a trial. The Duchess of Harrington requires a ball gown embellished for the Millbrook celebration in 3 weeks' time. Can you create a bodice and sleeve design in gold thread and pearls by then? Yes. Then we have an agreement, madame. What shall I call you? Rosalind thought for a moment. The silk shadow will suffice. How theatrical, Madame Lefebvre said, with a hint of amusement. Very well, silk shadow. Return in 1 week with a design proposal. And so began Rosalind's new existence. By day, she worked tirelessly at her embroidery frame, creating increasingly elaborate designs that soon became the talk of fashionable London. By night, she calculated and recalculated her meagre finances, stretching every penny. The arrangement with Madame Lefebvre provided just enough to maintain her modest household. Herself, Martha, and an elderly cook who had refused to abandon her after the scandal. The veiled visits to the modiste's shop became her only connection to the world beyond her small house. She learned to listen from behind her veil as society ladies discussed their upcoming events while being fitted. Through these overheard conversations, Rosalind kept abreast of the very society that had expelled her. It was a peculiar form of exile, present yet invisible, contributing beauty to the very world that had deemed her unworthy. 6 months passed in this fashion. The name, the Silk Shadow, began to appear in society columns, with speculation about the mysterious artisan whose needlework adorned the gowns of duchesses and countesses. Some whispered that she was a foreign princess fallen on hard times, others that she was a nobleman's mistress with a talent for embroidery. No one suspected that the disgraced Lady Lowell, now all but forgotten by society, was the creator of these coveted embellishments. One afternoon in early spring, Rosalind arrived at Madame Lefebvre's shop for her usual weekly meeting, only to find the modiste in a state of agitation. Ah, you are here. Excellent, Madame Lefebvre ushered her quickly into the private fitting room. A gentleman has been making inquiries about you, most persistent. He wishes to commission work directly. Rosalind stiffened beneath her veil. You know that is impossible. Our agreement. Yes, yes, discretion above all. I told him nothing, naturally, but he left his card and insisted I give it to you. She pressed a small calling card into Rosalind's gloved hand. In elegant black script was printed, Isaiah Montague-esque, Montague House, Grosvenor Square. The name sent an unexpected jolt through Rosalind's body. The gentleman from the church steps, nearly forgotten in the months of her isolation. What could he possibly want with her needlework? Did he explain the nature of his commission? She asked, striving to keep her voice steady. Only that it was of a personal nature and that he would pay handsomely. Madame Lefebvre lowered her voice. He is extraordinarily wealthy, they say, made a fortune in India and China. Now he has returned to establish himself in London society. Rosalind slipped the card into her reticule. Please inform Mr. Montague that I must decline. I work exclusively for your establishment. But as she made her way home through the bustling streets, Rosalind found her thoughts returning to the enigmatic Mr. Montague. There had been something in his manner during their brief encounter that had struck her, a directness, an absence of the superficial charm that characterized so many gentlemen of the ton. Her reverie was interrupted by the sight of a familiar figure on the steps of her modest house. Panic seized her as she recognized Lord Pembroke, the very man whose unwanted attentions had precipitated her fall from grace. She quickened her pace, reaching the house just as he turned to leave. "Lady Lowell," he said, his smile as oily as she remembered. "How fortuitous! I was beginning to think you were avoiding your old friends." "We were never friends, Lord Pembroke," Rosalind replied coldly, grateful that her veil concealed her expression. "Please excuse me." He blocked her path to the door. Now, is that any way to greet a gentleman who has gone to considerable trouble to find you? Society has been most dull without your vivacity." "Your wife might disagree." Rosalind tried to step around him, but he moved closer. "My wife is visiting her mother in Bath. I find myself at leisure." His voice dropped. "And in search of companionship. Your circumstances must be quite reduced these days. Perhaps we might come to an arrangement that would benefit us both." The implication was unmistakable. Rage and disgust flooded through Rosalind, momentarily overwhelming her fear. "I would rather starve in the gutter than accept anything from you, sir," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "Now stand aside, or I shall be forced to call for assistance." Lord Pembroke's expression hardened. "Your pride is misplaced, my dear. Your reputation is already in tatters. What difference would a little pragmatism make now?" "The difference between dignity and true disgrace," Rosalind retorted. "Something you would know nothing about." A carriage drew up to the curb, momentarily distracting Lord Pembroke. Rosalind seized the opportunity to push past him and fumble with her key in the lock. "This discussion isn't finished," Pembroke called after her as she slipped inside and slammed the door. Leaning against the closed door, Rosalind struggled to calm her racing heart. Lord Pembroke's appearance was an ominous development. If he knew where she lived, he might return, perhaps when she was alone. The thought sent a chill through her. "My lady," Martha appeared from the kitchen, her expression concerned. "Are you unwell? You're trembling." "It's nothing, Martha. Just a disagreeable encounter on the street." "A gentleman left this for you earlier." Martha handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Most insistent he was, though he wouldn't give his name." With unsteady fingers, Rosalind unwrapped the package. Inside was a square of fabric unlike any she had ever seen, silk of such luminous quality it seemed to capture and hold the light. Midnight blue with threads of silver and gold woven through it, the material was clearly of Oriental origin and enormously valuable. A note accompanied it, written in a bold, masculine hand. "Lady Lowell, I understand you have become the silk shadow whose artistry has captivated London. This fabric comes from the imperial workshops of China, where I spent many years. I seek a waistcoat embroidered by your hand, for reasons I would prefer to explain in person. My carriage will call for you at noon tomorrow, if you are willing to hear my proposal. With respect, Isaiah Montague." Rosalind sank into a chair, the exquisite fabric pooling in her lap. How had he discovered her identity, and what could he possibly want that required such extraordinary measures? She should refuse, of course. Meeting privately with a gentleman would only invite further scandal. And yet, the encounter with Lord Pembroke had shaken her. Perhaps it would be wise to hear what Mr. Montague had to say, if only to understand how her carefully constructed anonymity had been breached. The following day, precisely at noon, a sleek black carriage with the Montague crest emblazoned on its door arrived at Rosalind's house. The driver presented her with a sealed note. "Lady Lowell, I await you at Montague House. My housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, will receive you in the drawing-room. You have my word as a gentleman that your reputation will suffer no further damage from this meeting." "I am." Curiosity overcoming caution, Rosalind donned her veil and stepped into the carriage. As they travelled toward the fashionable district of Grosvenor Square, she tried to imagine what possible business Mr. Montague could have with her that required such secrecy and expense. Montague House proved to be an imposing Georgian mansion, recently renovated by all appearances. Rosalind was admitted by a dignified butler and escorted to a drawing-room where an elderly woman in a black dress and white cap awaited her. "Lady Lowell, welcome," the woman said with a curtsy. "I am Mrs. Winters, Mr. Montague's housekeeper. He will join you shortly. May I offer refreshment?" "No, thank you," Rosalind replied, remaining standing though her legs trembled slightly. "I don't intend to stay long." Mrs. Winters nodded understandingly. "Please be assured, my lady, that your presence here is known only to myself, Mr. Montague, and his driver, all of whom are the soul of discretion." Before Rosalind could respond, the door opened and Isaiah Montague entered. He was dressed more casually than at their first meeting, in a well-cut jacket of deep burgundy that complemented his unusual colouring. Up close, she could see that his face, though handsome, bore the subtle marks of a man who had lived in harsh climates, a certain weathering around the eyes, a faint scar along his jaw. "Lady Lowell," he said with a formal bow, "I appreciate your willingness to meet with me." "Your note left me little choice, Mr. Montague," she replied, her voice cool despite her agitation. "You claim to know my identity, which I have taken great pains to conceal. I would know how you came by this information." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "Direct and forthright, I admire that." He gestured to a chair. "Please, will you sit? This may require some explanation." Reluctantly, Rosalind took a seat, though she perched on its edge, ready to depart at a moment's notice. "I'm listening." Isaiah Montague seated himself across from her, his amber eyes studying her with undisguised interest. "First, allow me to assure you that your secret is safe with me. I have no intention of revealing your identity to anyone." "That doesn't explain how you discovered it." "No, it doesn't." He leaned forward slightly. "I recognized your handiwork, Lady Lowell. The distinctive style, the technique with the seed pearls. I've seen it before." Confusion furrowed Rosalind's brow beneath her veil. "That's impossible. My embroidery patterns come from my mother's collection. They've never been published or widely circulated." "Your mother was Lady Helena Lowell, formerly Miss Helena Chen, was she not?" The question struck Rosalind like a physical blow. Her mother's maiden name was a closely guarded family secret. Helena had been the daughter of a British merchant and a Chinese noblewoman, a heritage that had been carefully obscured when she married Baron Lowell 30 years ago. "How could you possibly know that?" Rosalind whispered. "Because I spent 15 years in Hong Kong and Shanghai," Isaiah replied quietly. "I knew your mother's family. The Chen family's silk embroidery techniques are legendary in certain circles. When I saw the Duchess of Harrington's gown at the Millbrook Ball, I recognized the distinctive style immediately. It took only a small amount of investigation to trace the work back to Madame Lefebvre, and from there, well, I have resources at my disposal." Rosalind's mind raced. Her mother had rarely spoken of her Chinese heritage, knowing that such connections could damage her position in English society. That Mr. Montague had uncovered this carefully buried history was deeply unsettling. "What do you want from me, Mr. Montague?" He rose and walked to a cabinet, returning with a small wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. "I want to commission a waistcoat for a very specific occasion. The fabrics and threads I've provided are of the highest quality, worthy of your skill." "You could have requested this through Madame Lefebvre," Rosalind pointed out. "Why this elaborate scheme to meet privately?" Isaiah Montague's expression became more serious. "Because what I'm about to tell you must remain absolutely confidential." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "In 1 month's time, I will be hosting a gathering at which a very distinguished guest will be present, Prince Albert, consort to Her Majesty." Rosalind inhaled sharply. A royal connection was the last thing she had expected. The prince has expressed interest in my collection of Chinese artifacts and manuscripts, Isaiah continued. This gathering will be small but significant, potentially the first step toward a royal patronage of Anglo-Chinese cultural exchange. I wish to wear something that subtly honors both traditions. And you believe my needlework is suitable for such an occasion. I believe it is the perfect embodiment of the bridge between East and West. His gaze was direct, unwavering. Just as you are, Lady Lowell. The statement hung in the air between them. Rosalind felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with potential scandal. You presume too much about my heritage, sir, she said stiffly. Perhaps, he acknowledged, but I mean no disrespect. Quite the contrary. I have spent my life between worlds, Lady Lowell, neither fully accepted in England nor truly belonging in China. I recognize a kindred spirit when I meet one. There was something in his tone, an honesty, a lack of artifice, that resonated with Rosalind. Still, caution prevailed. What exactly would this commission entail? A waistcoat incorporating traditional Chinese motifs that would be appropriate for a formal English gathering, he explained, opening the wooden box to reveal an assortment of colored silks and gold threads. I leave the design to your expertise, with one request, that it include the imperial dragon and phoenix motifs, symbols of balance and harmony. Rosalind hesitated. The commission would pay far more than her usual work for Madame Lefevre, yet accepting meant forming a connection with Mr. Montague, a man who knew too much about her already. I would pay £500, he added quietly. The sum was staggering, enough to secure her modest household for 2 years or more. Why such generosity for mere needlework, Mr. Montague? His expression softened slightly. Because I understand the value of what you create, Lady Lowell, both its aesthetic worth and the circumstances that have forced you to work in shadows. A chill ran through her. You know about the scandal. I make it my business to be thoroughly informed. His voice remained matter of fact, without judgment. London society can be unforgiving, particularly to women. Rosalind stood abruptly. I don't require your pity, Mr. Montague. Nor am I offering it, he countered, rising as well. I'm offering a business arrangement between equals, your skill for my patronage. She studied him through her veil, trying to discern his true intentions. There was something compelling about Isaiah Montague, a directness, a lack of pretense that set him apart from other gentlemen of her acquaintance. And yet, experience had taught her to distrust men who showed interest in a ruined woman. I will consider your offer, she said finally, but I make no promises. That is all I ask. He closed the wooden box and extended it toward her. Keep these materials regardless of your decision. They belong with someone who understands their value. As Rosalind reached for the box, their fingers brushed momentarily. Even through her gloves, she felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. Your carriage will return you home whenever you wish, Isaiah said, stepping back. And Lady Lowell, thank you for trusting me enough to come here today. In the privacy of the carriage, returning her to her modest home, Rosalind lifted her veil and examined the contents of the wooden box more carefully. The silks were of extraordinary quality, in jewel tones of sapphire, emerald, and ruby. The gold threads caught the afternoon light, filtering through the carriage windows. More intriguing was a small sketchbook tucked beneath the fabrics. Opening it, she found pages of drawings, Chinese landscapes, architectural details, and studies of dragons and phoenixes. On the inside cover was a personal inscription. Ideas for your consideration. These patterns come from the Summer Palace in Beijing, where I spent many months studying Chinese art and culture. I am. The sketches revealed a sensitive hand and an artistic eye. They spoke of a man who appreciated beauty and detail, a man very different from the merchants and aristocrats who populated London society. By the time the carriage reached her home, Rosalind had made her decision. The commission was too valuable to refuse, both financially and artistically. Yet caution would be necessary. Isaiah Montague was still an unknown quantity, a man with too much knowledge about her past and uncertain motives for the present. That evening, as Martha helped her prepare for bed, Rosalind found herself dwelling on the day's events. "You seem preoccupied, my lady," Martha observed as she brushed out Rosalind's long auburn hair. "Did something occur at your meeting?" "I've accepted a private commission," Rosalind replied, meeting Martha's eyes in the mirror. "A significant one, from Mr. Montague." Martha's hands stilled. "The gentleman whose carriage brought you home, is that wise, my lady?" "Probably not," Rosalind admitted, "but it may be necessary. Lord Pembroke's appearance yesterday troubles me. If he continues his unwanted attentions, we may need to leave London. This commission would provide the means to do so." "And does Mr. Montague seem honourable?" A fair question, given Rosalind's history. "I believe so, though his interest in me is puzzling. He claims to admire my needlework, but I sense there's more to it." "Perhaps he admires more than your stitches," Martha suggested with raised eyebrows. "Don't be ridiculous," Rosalind chided, though a flush rose to her cheeks. "I am a social pariah, and he is newly established in London society. Any association with me would only damage his prospects." Yet as she lay in bed that night, Rosalind found herself recalling the intensity in Isaiah Montague's amber eyes when he had called her a kindred spirit. There had been something in that gaze, recognition, perhaps, or understanding, that had touched a lonely place within her heart. She dismissed the thought as quickly as it arose. She had learned her lesson about trusting too readily. This commission was business, nothing more, and if Isaiah Montague harbored ulterior motives, she would be prepared. Over the following weeks, Rosalind devoted herself to the waistcoat commission with an intensity that surprised even her. The design she created integrated Chinese imperial motifs with English formal aesthetics, a dragon and phoenix circling each other amidst stylized clouds and waves, rendered in gold thread against midnight blue silk. Each evening, after completing her daily work for Madame Lefebvre, she would lose herself in the intricate stitches, sometimes working until her candles burned low and her eyes strained in the dim light. She communicated with Mr. Montague through notes delivered by his driver, brief, businesslike exchanges about design elements and timing. He responded with equally professional courtesy, never overstepping the boundaries she had established. 3 weeks into the project, a different sort of note arrived from Madame Lefebvre. "My dear silk shadow, I regret to inform you that Lord P. has been making inquiries about my mysterious embroiderer. He seemed most insistent, claiming a personal interest in commissioning work. I told him nothing, naturally, but his manner was most concerning. Take care, my dear. Madame L." The warning sent a chill through Rosalind. Lord Pembroke's persistence suggested his interest went beyond mere dalliance. Perhaps he saw her vulnerability as an opportunity for revenge after her public rejection of his advances. That same evening, returning from a necessary errand to purchase bread and tea, Rosalind noticed a man following her at a distance. Panic seized her as she quickened her pace, turning down side streets in an attempt to lose her pursuer. By the time she reached her house, her heart was pounding, and her hands trembled as she fumbled with her key. Once safely inside, she peered through the curtains to see a figure lingering in the shadows across the street. Though she couldn't make out his features, something in his posture suggested he was watching the house. For the first time since her disgrace, Rosalind felt truly afraid. Her ruined reputation now seemed a trivial concern compared to her physical safety. Lord Pembroke had the resources and connections to make her life unbearable, or worse. With shaking hands, she pennied a note to Isaiah Montague. "Mr. Montague, Circumstances force me to request an earlier meeting than planned. The commission progresses well, but I have concerns that cannot be expressed in writing. Might your carriage call for me tomorrow at 10? RL. His response arrived within the hour. Lady Lowell. My carriage will await you at the appointed time. If your concerns are of an urgent nature, please do not hesitate to call upon me immediately. Montague House stands ready to offer whatever assistance you require. I am. The next morning, Rosalind arrived at Montague House, clutching both her needlework and Madame Lefever's warning note. Mrs. Winters conducted her to a bright morning room where Isaiah Montague awaited her, standing by a window overlooking a small but elegant garden. Lady Lowell, he greeted her, his expression concerned. Your note suggested some urgency. Rosalind handed him Madame Lefever's warning without preamble. Lord Pembroke has been making inquiries about the silk shadow. He has also called at my home, and I believe has set someone to watch my movements. Isaiah read the note, his expression darkening. This is disturbing news indeed. Has he approached you directly since your last encounter? No, but I fear it's only a matter of time. Rosalind's voice remained steady despite her inner turmoil. I believe he means to coerce me into becoming his mistress. My ruined reputation makes me an easy target. Who would believe or defend a fallen woman? I would, Isaiah said quietly, his amber eyes meeting hers through her veil. And I have considerably more influence in London than Lord Pembroke might suspect. The simple declaration caught Rosalind off guard. Why would you involve yourself in my difficulties, Mr. Montague? We are barely acquainted. He gestured for her to be seated, then took the chair opposite her. Because I despise men who use their power to intimidate women, and because I feel somewhat responsible for your current predicament. Responsible? How could you possibly? I should have been more discreet in my inquiries about the silk shadow, he explained. My interest may have inadvertently drawn attention to your work, making it easier for Pembroke to connect the threads, so to speak. That seems unlikely, Rosalind countered. Lord Pembroke has never shown interest in needlework or fashion. His pursuit is personal, a matter of thwarted pride. Isaiah nodded thoughtfully. Nevertheless, I would like to offer my assistance. There are several possibilities to consider. Such as? First, we could arrange for you to relocate to another part of London under a different name, with new employment secured. Rosalind shook her head. That would mean abandoning my household staff, who have remained loyal despite everything, and starting anew elsewhere would be difficult without references. Then, perhaps, a more direct approach. I have connections in diplomatic circles who could arrange an uncomfortable interview for Lord Pembroke with certain officials. A hint that his behavior has attracted unwanted attention might be sufficient to deter him. That assumes he fears official censure, Rosalind said skeptically. Men like Pembroke believe themselves untouchable. A fair point. Isaiah drummed his fingers lightly on the arm of his chair, considering. There is another option, though it is rather more unconventional. Something in his tone made Rosalind wary. What sort of option? You could accept my protection openly. Rosalind stiffened. If you are suggesting that I become your mistress, Mr. Montague, I must inform you that I would rather face Pembroke's harassment than— No, he interrupted firmly. That is not what I'm proposing. I meant that you could accept a position in my household, perhaps as a curator for my collection of Oriental textiles and art. It would be a legitimate position with proper compensation, and your residence here would place you under the protection of my name and influence. The proposal was so unexpected that Rosalind could only stare at him in silence. I realize it's unorthodox, Isaiah continued, but it would serve multiple purposes. You would be safe from Pembroke's advances, your financial concerns would be addressed, and I would gain the expertise of someone uniquely qualified to help catalogue and preserve my collection. The ton would assume the worst regardless, Rosalind pointed out. An unmarried woman living in a bachelor's household, regardless of the pretext, would be considered ruined. A hint of a smile touched Isaiah's lips. Lady Lowell, forgive my bluntness, but according to society, you are already ruined. What further damage could possibly be done to your reputation? The observation, though painful, contained an undeniable truth. Her reputation was indeed beyond salvaging by conventional means. And yet, why would you make such an offer to a virtual stranger? She asked, suspicion edging her voice. What do you gain from this arrangement? Isaiah rose and walked to a sideboard, where he poured 2 glasses of sherry. Offering one to Rosalind, he said, "May I speak candidly, Lady Lowell? I would prefer that to pretty falsehoods." Very well. He took a seat again, his expression serious. I returned to England with considerable wealth and a desire to establish myself in London society. I quickly discovered that my years in the East have left me, unsuited for the superficiality of ton gatherings. I find the endless gossip tedious, the social climbers transparent, and the rigid adherence to meaningless conventions suffocating. He took a sip of his sherry before continuing. When I encountered you at your cousin's wedding, I observed a woman maintaining dignity in the face of cruel ostracism. Later, when I discovered your work as the silk shadow, I recognized someone of extraordinary talent forced to hide in plain sight. Both instances spoke of character and resilience, qualities I find far more valuable than the social currency that rules London drawing rooms. Rosalind remained silent, absorbing his words. The position I offer is genuine, he added. My collection requires proper cataloguing and care. Your understanding of both Eastern and Western aesthetics makes you uniquely qualified. That this arrangement would also secure your safety from Pembroke's harassment is a felicitous combination of circumstances. It was a tempting proposition. Safety, security, and meaningful employment, all things that had seemed beyond her reach since the scandal. And yet the arrangement would bind her to this enigmatic man whose motives, despite his explanations, remained somewhat opaque to her. I would need time to consider, she said finally. Of course, Isaiah nodded. Though I fear time may be a luxury you cannot afford if Pembroke is indeed watching your movements. As if to underscore his point, a knock came at the door, and Mrs. Winters entered with an envelope on a silver tray. Forgive the interruption, sir, but this message has just arrived for Lady Lowell. The messenger said it was most urgent. Rosalind accepted the envelope with a sense of foreboding. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar, but the contents turned her blood cold. Lady R. Your secret employment has been discovered. Unless you wish the entire ton to learn how the disgraced Lady Lowell now serves as a common seamstress, you will receive me at your home this evening at 8 o'clock. We have much to discuss regarding your future prospects. Lord P. Her hands trembling, Rosalind passed the note to Isaiah, who read it with a darkening expression. It seems Pembroke has forced your hand, he said grimly. He intends to use the revelation of your work as leverage. But why would anyone care that I embroider for a living? Rosalind asked, bewildered by the threat. Surely that's a respectable enough occupation, even for a fallen noblewoman. It's not the work itself that would concern the ton, Isaiah explained. It's the deception. You've been entering the homes and businesses of people who explicitly excluded you from their society. Some might even claim you used your position to gather gossip or secrets. Realization dawned. They would make me a social spy, rather than merely a fallen woman. Exactly, and in London's current political climate, with tensions between various factions, such accusations could be far more damaging than mere moral scandal. Rosalind set down her untouched sherry, suddenly feeling the full weight of her predicament. I have until 8 o'clock to decide my course of action. Lady Lowell, Rosalind, Isaiah said, using her given name for the first time. Allow me to be completely transparent. I admire you greatly. Your talent, your resilience, your dignity in the face of adversity all speak of a woman of exceptional character. The position I offer is genuine, but I would be lying if I claimed my interest in you was purely professional. His candor was both alarming and oddly refreshing. What exactly are you saying, Mr. Montague? That I hope, over time, you might come to see me as more than an employer or protector. His gaze held her steadily. But I give you my word as a gentleman that I will never press my advantage or make unwelcome advances. Your safety and comfort would be my paramount concern. Rosalind studied him through her veil, wishing she could better read the nuances of his expression. There was sincerity in his voice, and his actions thus far had been respectful. Still, she had been deceived before by men who appeared honorable. If I were to accept your offer, she said slowly, I would require certain conditions. Name them. I would maintain my own suite of rooms, with a lock to which only I have the key. My maid, Martha, and my cook would accompany me. I would continue my work for Madame Lefebvre, though perhaps under more secure arrangements, and I would expect a formal written contract detailing my duties and compensation. Agreed without reservation, Isaiah said promptly. I would add only that your personal safety might require certain precautions, restrictions on solitary outings, for instance, until Pembroke's threat is neutralized. The practicality of his response reassured her. This was not a man acting on impulse or passion, but one who had considered the matter carefully. There is one more thing, Rosalind added. I would not live under false pretenses. If I reside in your household, it must be acknowledged openly that I am employed as a curator, not hidden away as though I were a shameful secret. A smile of genuine warmth transformed Isaiah's features. I would have it no other way. In fact, your presence at the gathering for Prince Albert would be most appropriate, given your expertise with the textiles in my collection. The mention of the royal gathering reminded Rosalind of the waistcoat commission, still incomplete. Speaking of which, she unwrapped the partially finished garment from its protective cloth. The work progresses, though it requires at least another week of stitching. Isaiah examined the intricate embroidery with evident admiration. This is extraordinary. The integration of the dragon and phoenix motifs is masterful. Thank you. Despite everything, Rosalind felt a flush of pride at his praise. I've tried to balance the Eastern imagery with patterns that would be acceptable in an English court setting. You've succeeded brilliantly. He looked up from the fabric to meet her eyes. This represents exactly the cultural bridge, I hope, to build through my collection and connections. As he carefully rewrapped the waistcoat, Isaiah added, We haven't much time before Pembroke expects his answer. Might I suggest that Mrs. Winters show you the rooms that would be yours while I draft the contract we discussed? Then you can make your final decision with all the facts before you. Rosalind nodded her agreement as Mrs. Winters led her through the spacious house, showing her a lovely suite of rooms overlooking the garden. She found herself both drawn to and wary of the sanctuary being offered. The apartments intended for her use were elegant without being ostentatious. A sitting room with large windows, a bedroom with a canopied bed, a small study that could serve as a workroom for her embroidery, and even a private bathing chamber. All were decorated in soothing shades of blue and cream, with Oriental influences evident in the furnishings and artwork. Mr. Montague had these rooms refurbished recently, Mrs. Winters explained as they completed the tour. He said they needed a woman's touch, though he gave no indication of who might occupy them. How long have you been in Mr. Montague's service? Rosalind asked. Since he was a boy, the housekeeper replied. I served his parents until their passing, then remained to care for the London house, while Mr. Isaiah was abroad. And what sort of man is he? When no one is watching, I mean. Mrs. Winters considered the question thoughtfully. He is a private gentleman, my lady, generous with his staff, exacting in his business affairs, and possessed of a curious mind. He reads voraciously and often sits up late with his books and papers. She hesitated, then added, if I may be permitted an observation, he has seemed lonely since his return to England. A man out of place in his own country, if you take my meaning. Rosalind did understand. Her own experience of isolation after her social disgrace had given her insight into such displacement. Perhaps that was what Isaiah had meant by recognizing a kindred spirit. When they returned to the morning room, they found Isaiah at a writing desk, putting the finishing touches on a document. He rose as they entered. The contract, as discussed, he said, handing the papers to Rosalind. Please review it carefully. I've included provisions for your household staff, your continued work for Madame Lefebvre, and a quarterly stipend commensurate with the position of curator. The document was thorough and fair, detailing her responsibilities in cataloguing and preserving the collection, as well as assisting with exhibitions and cultural events. The compensation offered was generous, far more than she could earn through her needlework alone. Everything appears in order, she said, after reading it through twice. Though I notice you've included a clause about accompanying you to selected social gatherings. Only those related to the collection, Isaiah clarified. Cultural exchanges, museum exhibitions, and the like. I would never expect you to endure ton events where you might face uncomfortable scrutiny. His consideration touched her. Most men would not have anticipated the emotional toll such appearances might exact. And what of Lord Pembroke? She asked. How do we respond to his demand? With silence, I think. Isaiah's expression hardened. He expects you at 8 o'clock. By then, your household will be empty, your possessions removed, and my solicitor will have delivered a letter informing him that any further communication with you must be directed through legal channels. He won't accept that easily. No, but his options will be limited once you're established in my household. Isaiah's confidence was reassuring. Pembroke's influence is considerable, but it pales in comparison to the connections I've cultivated. The prince consort's patronage alone would make most men hesitate to challenge me openly. The decisiveness of his plan, combined with the fairness of his contract, tipped the balance in Rosalind's mind. She had few alternatives, and none that offered such comprehensive protection. Very well, Mr. Montague, she said, removing her veil for the first time in his presence. I accept your offer. Isaiah's gaze lingered on her revealed features, the clear green eyes, high cheekbones, and determined set of her mouth. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or admiration, before he collected himself. I'm honored by your trust, he said formally. I will endeavor to prove worthy of it. As they finalized the arrangements, Isaiah dispatching servants to pack and transport Rosalind's belongings, while his solicitor prepared the necessary legal communications, Rosalind felt a curious mixture of relief and trepidation. She was exchanging one form of uncertainty for another, one kind of vulnerability for a different sort altogether. For the first time since her disgrace, someone had offered not just assistance but respect. Isaiah Montague saw value in her beyond her ruined reputation or her physical attributes. He recognized her talent, her intelligence, her resilience. That recognition was as intoxicating as it was unfamiliar. And yet, as she signed her name to the contract that would bind their fates together, Rosalind could not help wondering what unseen currents might lie beneath the surface of this arrangement, and whether, in escaping one man's unwanted attentions, she might be stepping into an entirely different sort of danger. By nightfall, Rosalind was installed in her new quarters at Montague House, her modest possessions arranged to create a sense of familiarity in these grander surroundings. Martha and cook had been settled in comfortable rooms near the servants' quarters, though their status as Lady Lowell's personal staff granted them certain privileges not extended to the regular household servants. "It's like a palace," Martha whispered as she helped Rosalind prepare for dinner. "And Mr. Montague seems a decent sort, not like some gentleman who look at a lady as if she were a sweetmeat to be devoured." "We shall see," Rosalind replied, selecting a simple evening dress of deep green silk, one of the few fine garments she had retained after selling most of her wardrobe to pay debts. "His offer is generous, perhaps too much so. I cannot help wondering what he truly expects in return." "Sometimes, my lady, good fortune simply arrives without hidden costs," Martha suggested, arranging Rosalind's auburn hair in a simple but elegant style. "My grandmother used to say that not all storms end in destruction. Some clear the air for new growth." "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "She was indeed. And she would tell you to accept kindness when it's offered, especially after weathering such difficulties." Dinner was served in a small dining room rather than the formal one, creating an atmosphere of casual elegance rather than stiff formality. Isaiah proved to be an engaging host, sharing stories of his years in China and Hong Kong without dominating the conversation, and showing genuine interest in Rosalind's observations about art and society. "I've been meaning to ask," he said, as they were enjoying a dessert of poached pears. "How did you come to develop your embroidery skills to such an extraordinary level? Even with your mother's heritage, such mastery requires dedicated study." Rosalind hesitated, then decided that honesty was the wisest course with this perceptive man. "After my father's death, when I discovered the extent of his debts, I knew I might one day need to support myself. I began practicing in earnest, studying my mother's patterns and techniques, and experimenting with adaptations for modern tastes." "Foresight unusual in a woman of your background," Isaiah observed. "My background is perhaps more complex than you assume," she countered. "My father may have been a baron, but my mother never fully belonged in English society despite her marriage. She taught me to prepare for circumstances where lineage and connections might not suffice." Isaiah nodded thoughtfully. "She sounds remarkable." "She was." Rosalind's voice softened with memory. "She died when I was 16, consumption. My father never recovered from the loss. His gambling worsened, as did his drinking. By the time he passed 5 years ago, there was little left of the estate or his reputation. And yet you maintained your place in society until the incident with Pembroke." "By the thinnest of margins," Rosalind admitted. "I was tolerated because of family connections and because I had a modest dowry, enough to make me acceptable if not desirable as a potential bride. Once the scandal broke, those same connections were quick to distance themselves." "The Tun's loyalty is notoriously conditional," Isaiah said dryly. "I've observed how quickly allegiances shift when fortunes change or reputations falter." "You seem untroubled by such social mechanics," Rosalind noted. "Most men in your position will be cultivating powerful connections, perhaps seeking an advantageous marriage." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Perhaps I find the game tedious after years in cultures where different values prevail. In China, age and wisdom command respect, not merely wealth or title. And personal honor is measured by one's actions, not one's ancestry." "Radical notions in London drawing rooms," Rosalind said, with a hint of amusement. "No wonder you find yourself at odds with society's expectations." "As do you, Lady Lowell." His amber eyes held hers across the table, "though for very different reasons." The observation created a moment of connection between them, a recognition of their shared outsider status, albeit arrived at through different paths. After dinner, Isaiah escorted Rosalind to a magnificent library where they continued their conversation over tea. The room was clearly his sanctuary, with walls of books, comfortable leather chairs, and display cases containing artifacts from his travels. "Tomorrow I'll show you the textile collection," he said, as Rosalind admired a delicate jade carving. "It's housed in a special room with controlled light and humidity to prevent deterioration. Many of the pieces are centuries old and irreplaceable." "I look forward to it," Rosalind replied sincerely. Despite her lingering wariness, she found herself genuinely intrigued by the prospect of working with such treasures. As the evening grew late, Isaiah escorted her to the door of her suite. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," he said formally. "Please don't hesitate to request anything you might need." "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Montague," Rosalind responded, equally formal. "It hasn't gone unnoticed or unappreciated." "Isaiah, please," he corrected gently. "If we're to work closely together, such formality seems unnecessary." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Very well, Isaiah, and you may call me Rosalind if you wish." "Rosalind," he seemed to savor the name. "Rest well. Tomorrow will bring new beginnings for us both." As she prepared for bed in her new surroundings, Rosalind found herself reflecting on the strange turns her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had been a social outcast, surviving through anonymous needlework. Now she was installed in a grand house under the protection of one of London's wealthiest bachelors, about to begin work as a curator of Oriental textiles. The arrangement was unorthodox, potentially scandalous, and yet strangely liberating. For the first time since her disgrace, she had been offered a role that valued her knowledge and skills rather than judging her past mistakes. Still, as she drifted towards sleep in the unfamiliar bed, Rosalind could not entirely silence the voice of caution that whispered in her mind. Isaiah Montague remained something of an enigma, a man whose motives, despite his apparent transparency, were not yet fully clear to her, and experience had taught her that men seldom offered assistance to women without expecting something in return. What that something might be, and whether she would be willing to give it, were questions that followed her into uneasy dreams. The following morning, Rosalind awoke to find a note slipped beneath her door. "Rosalind, I've been called to an unexpected meeting at the Foreign Office regarding the royal visit. Mrs. Winters will show you the textile collection room when you're ready. I look forward to hearing your initial impressions when I return this afternoon. Isaiah." The note's businesslike tone reassured her. Whatever personal interest Isaiah might harbor, he was clearly committed to maintaining professional boundaries in their working relationship. After breakfast in her sitting room, Rosalind followed Mrs. Winters to a secluded wing of the house. The housekeeper unlocked a door with a large key, revealing a spacious, climate-controlled room lined with custom-built cabinets and display cases. "Mr. Montague had this room specially constructed when he returned from the East," Mrs. Winters explained. "The windows are covered with a special material that filters the light to prevent fading, and there are devices that maintain the proper humidity. He's most particular about the preservation of these items." Rosalind stepped into the room with a sense of wonder. The collection was far more extensive than she had imagined. Hundreds of textiles ranging from simple peasant garments to elaborate court robes, all carefully stored or displayed. "This is extraordinary," she murmured, examining a silk hanging embroidered with a scene of court ladies in a garden. "Some of these pieces must be museum quality." "Indeed, my lady, Mr. Montague has loaned several items to the British Museum for special exhibitions. He believes these treasures should be shared with scholars and the public, not hidden away in private collections." Over the next several hours, Rosalind lost herself in exploration, carefully examining drawer after drawer of exquisite fabrics. She found handwritten notes in Isaiah's precise script accompanying many pieces, detailing their provenance, historical significance, and cultural context. By mid-afternoon, she had developed a preliminary plan for cataloging the collection more systematically and creating a proper exhibition schedule. She was making notes at a small desk when she heard the door open behind her. "I see you've discovered the Qing dynasty court robes," Isaiah said, approaching to stand beside her. The yellow one, with the dragon motifs, was worn by a minor prince during ceremonial functions. "The craftsmanship is breathtaking," Rosalind replied, gesturing to the intricate embroidery. "I've been studying the technique used for the dragon scales. It's unlike anything I've seen in Western needlework." "It's called seed stitching," Isaiah explained. "Each scale is created with tiny stitches radiating from a central point, creating dimension and movement when light hits the surface. I'd like to incorporate a simplified version into your waistcoat," Rosalind said, warming to the technical discussion. "Perhaps for the dragon's body, to create a subtle three-dimensional effect." "That would be perfect." His enthusiasm matched hers. "I knew you would understand the significance of these pieces better than any curator I might have hired from a museum or university." His praise, offered without flattery or exaggeration, pleased her more than she cared to admit. "Your collection deserves proper documentation and care. Some of these textiles are not just artistically significant, but historically valuable as primary sources." "Exactly my thinking." Isaiah pulled up a chair beside her. "I've been attempting to create a comprehensive record, but my knowledge has gaps, particularly regarding the feminine aspects of the collection, the domestic textiles, wedding garments, and items related to women's roles in Chinese society." "I noticed your notes focus primarily on the court garments and ceremonial pieces," Rosalind observed. "The women's robes and accessories have less detailed documentation." "A limitation of my perspective and access," he acknowledged. "As a foreign man, certain aspects of Chinese women's lives remained closed to me, even after years in the country." "Perhaps I can help fill those gaps," Rosalind suggested. "My mother's stories and the techniques she taught me might provide insights your observations couldn't capture." Isaiah's expression brightened. "That would be invaluable. This collection represents more than just beautiful objects to me. It's a cultural bridge between East and West, one I hope to strengthen through exhibitions and educational efforts." As they continued discussing the collection and planning their approach to cataloguing it, Rosalind found herself increasingly drawn into Isaiah's vision. His passion for cultural exchange seemed genuine, as did his respect for the artisans who had created these treasures. They were deep in conversation when Mrs. Winters appeared to announce that tea was served in the library. As they made their way there, Isaiah mentioned casually, "I received word from my solicitor this morning regarding Lord Pembroke." Rosalind tensed. "What news?" "He arrived at your former residence last night, as threatened. Finding it empty, he apparently created quite a scene. My solicitor delivered our letter this morning, making it clear that any further harassment would result in certain sensitive information about his gambling debts becoming public knowledge." "You have information about Pembroke's debts?" Rosalind asked, surprised. "I make it my business to understand the vulnerabilities of potential adversaries," Isaiah replied matter-of-factly. "In this case, it seems Lord Pembroke has been borrowing heavily from some rather unsavory lenders. His estate is mortgaged to the hilt, and his wife's dowry has been nearly depleted." Rosalind absorbed this information thoughtfully. So his pursuit of me might have been financially motivated as well as personal. "Quite possibly. A vulnerable woman with aristocratic connections might have been useful to him in various ways." Isaiah's tone hardened. "Men like Pembroke view others as resources to be exploited, not as human beings deserving of dignity and respect." The conversation shifted to lighter topics over tea, but Rosalind found herself contemplating Isaiah's approach to the Pembroke situation. He had neutralized the threat efficiently, using knowledge and legal means rather than brute force or social pressure. It spoke of a man accustomed to navigating complex situations with intelligence and foresight. That evening, after dinner, Rosalind worked on the waistcoat commission in her sitting room, incorporating the new techniques she had observed in the collection. She was so absorbed in her work that she barely noticed the passing hours until a soft knock at her door startled her. "Come in," she called, setting aside her needlework. Isaiah entered, carrying a small wooden box. "Forgive the interruption at this late hour, but I thought you might find these useful for your work." He placed the box on the table beside her. Thread specimens from various provinces in China, including some rare gold-wrapped silk from the imperial workshops. Rosalind opened the box to find dozens of small spools of thread in colors she had never seen before, vibrant hues and subtle shades that would add extraordinary dimension to her embroidery. "These are magnificent," she breathed, lifting a spool of thread that shifted from azure to violet as it caught the light. "I've never seen such colors." "They're created using dye techniques that are closely guarded secrets among certain families," Isaiah explained. "The materials are extracted from plants, minerals, and insects found only in specific regions. Thank you for sharing them with me." She looked up at him with genuine gratitude. "They'll transform my work." For a moment, their eyes met in shared appreciation of beauty and craftsmanship, a connection that transcended their unusual circumstances and the lingering caution between them. "I'm pleased you find them useful," Isaiah said, breaking the moment. "I should let you return to your work. Good night, Rosalind." "Good night, Isaiah." After he departed, Rosalind found herself contemplating the small gift and what it represented. The threads were valuable, certainly, but it was the thoughtfulness behind the gesture that affected her most deeply. Isaiah had recognized a need in her work before she herself had articulated it, and had responded with generosity rather than calculation. Over the following days, a routine established itself. Mornings were devoted to cataloguing the textile collection, with Isaiah often joining Rosalind to provide historical context or translation of Chinese inscriptions. Afternoons typically found her working on the waistcoat commission or assisting Isaiah with correspondence related to the upcoming royal visit. Evenings were spent in comfortable conversation in the library or working on her embroidery, while Isaiah attended to business matters. The arrangement was surprisingly harmonious. Isaiah proved to be a considerate employer, valuing her opinions and expertise without presumption or condescension. For her part, Rosalind found genuine satisfaction in the work, applying her knowledge to preserve and document treasures that might otherwise be misunderstood or undervalued. Their personal interactions remained cordial but careful, each maintaining a certain reserve despite the growing ease between them. Rosalind was conscious of Isaiah watching her sometimes, his amber eyes thoughtful, but he never overstepped the boundaries they had established. A week into her residence at Montague House, Rosalind was working in the textile room when she heard raised voices in the corridor outside, Isaiah's deep tones and another man's strident demands. "I insist on seeing her," the second voice proclaimed. "You have no right to keep Lady Lowell isolated from her family." With a jolt, Rosalind recognized her cousin Edward's voice, Charlotte's brother and her late father's heir. She had not seen him since the scandal broke, when he had made it abundantly clear that she was no longer welcome at family gatherings. The door opened abruptly, and Edward strode in, followed by an apologetic-looking Isaiah. "Cousin," Edward said coldly, taking in her simple day dress and the textiles spread around her. "So it's true. You found yourself a protector." "Edward," Rosalind acknowledged with equal coolness. "What brings you to Montague House?" "Concern for what remains of our family's reputation." His gaze flickered dismissively over the room. "Though I see you have little concern for such matters yourself." Isaiah stepped forward. "Lord Harwick, as I explained, Lady Lowell is employed as the curator of my textile collection. Her residence here is a matter of professional convenience, not the arrangement you imply." Edward snorted derisively. A convenient fiction, Mr. Montague. No one in society will believe such nonsense. I'm not particularly concerned with society's beliefs, Isaiah replied evenly. Only with facts. And the fact is that your cousin is a respected expert in textile arts, whose knowledge is invaluable to my collection. Rosalind, Edward turned to her, ignoring Isaiah. Your behavior reflects on all who share the Lowell name. First the scandal with Pembroke, now this arrangement. Have you no sense of family obligation? Anger flared within Rosalind. Family obligation. Where was your sense of obligation when you refused to help me after father's death? When you and Aunt Harwick spread rumors questioning my character even before the Pembroke incident? When you denied me even the courtesy of defending myself against false accusations? Her cousin had the grace to look uncomfortable. The circumstances were difficult, my mother felt. Your mother saw an opportunity to distance herself from a potentially embarrassing connection, Rosalind interrupted. And you were happy to follow her lead rather than honor the bonds of family that my father always respected. Edward's expression hardened. Your father was a wastrel and a gambler who nearly ruined the family name long before you completed the task. I've spent years rebuilding what he destroyed. The cruel assessment of her beloved father, however flawed he had been, struck Rosalind like a physical blow. Before she could respond, Isaiah stepped between them. Lord Harwick, he said, his voice dangerously quiet, I must ask you to moderate your language when speaking to a lady under my roof. Under your protection, you mean? Edward sneered. Let's not pretend this is anything but what it is. It is exactly as I've stated, Isaiah replied, his composure unruffled despite the tension in his posture. Lady Lowell is my employee and my guest. Any implication to the contrary reflects poorly on your discernment, not on her character. Edward looked from Isaiah to Rosalind, his expression calculating. I came here prepared to offer assistance, a small allowance, and perhaps a cottage on the estate where you might live quietly without causing further scandal. But I see you've made your choice. Yes, I have, Rosalind said, finding her voice again. I've chosen dignity and meaningful work over the quiet excel you so generously offer. I've chosen to use my skills and knowledge rather than hide away as an embarrassing family secret. Then you've made your bed, Edward said coldly. Don't expect the family to acknowledge you when this arrangement inevitably ends. I expect nothing from a family that has already demonstrated its conditional loyalty, Rosalind replied. Please give my regards to Charlotte. She, at least, attempted kindness when others chose cruelty. After Edward departed, a heavy silence fell between Rosalind and Isaiah. She fought to control the emotions his visit had unleashed, anger, hurt, and a deep sense of betrayal that still felt raw despite the months since her family had abandoned her. I'm sorry you had to witness that, she said finally, turning away to organize the textile samples with trembling hands. You have nothing to apologize for, Isaiah replied gently. Lord Harwick's behavior was inexcusable. He simply expressed what most of society thinks. Rosalind kept her voice steady with effort. That a ruined woman living in a bachelor's household must be a mistress, regardless of any professional pretense. Does that bother you greatly? The opinion of people who abandoned you when you needed them most. The question made her pause. Did it truly matter what society thought of her now? She had already lost everything that conventional propriety valued, her reputation, her position, her family connections. What remained was her self-respect, her talents, and her determination to forge a life on her own terms. Less than it once would have, she admitted, though I confess it pains me to think that my father's memory is tarnished by association with my disgrace. Isaiah moved closer, though he was careful not to invade her space. Your father would be proud of your resilience, Rosalind, of your refusal to be diminished by circumstances or others' judgments. You cannot know that, she said softly. You never met him. I know what you've told me of him, that despite his flaws, he loved you and your mother deeply, that he valued beauty and saw worth in things beyond their monetary value or social utility. Isaiah's voice was gentle but firm. Such a man would recognize the courage it takes to rebuild a life from ashes. His words touched something deep within her, a wound that had festered beneath her carefully maintained composure. Tears pricked at her eyes, and she turned away, unwilling to display such vulnerability. I should continue with the cataloguing, she said, her voice carefully controlled. There's still much to be done before the royal visit. Isaiah seemed about to say more, but instead nodded respectfully. Of course, I have correspondence to attend to myself. We'll speak at dinner. After he departed, Rosalind sank into a chair, finally allowing the tears to come. They were not tears of self-pity, but of release, letting go of the last vestiges of hope that her family might eventually welcome her back into the fold. Edward's visit had made it clear that such reconciliation was impossible. She was truly alone now, save for the unusual alliance she had formed with Isaiah Montague. And yet, as she regained her composure and returned to her work, Rosalind realized that she felt lighter, as though a burden had been lifted. The pretense was over. She need no longer shape her actions around the remote possibility of social redemption. Her path forward lay in embracing her new role and the unexpected partnership that had formed between herself and the enigmatic man who had offered her sanctuary. That evening at dinner, neither mentioned Edward's visit directly, but Rosalind sensed a subtle shift in Isaiah's manner toward her, a softening, a heightened attentiveness that manifested in small courtesies and thoughtful gestures. I've been meaning to ask, he said as they lingered over dessert. Would you consider attending the royal visit, not just as my curator, but as my official hostess? The gathering will be small, 20 guests at most, but having a lady of the house to oversee arrangements would be invaluable. Rosalind looked up in surprise. Hostess, that would imply a connection between us that might fuel exactly the sort of gossip Edward warned against. Perhaps, Isaiah acknowledged, but it would also establish your position within my household as one of authority and respect, not concealment. The guests will include diplomats, scholars, and artists, people who value knowledge and talent above social conventions. Prince Albert himself is known for his patronage of individuals with exceptional skills, regardless of their background. The proposal was tempting. After months of hiding behind a veil, the idea of stepping forward openly in a role that acknowledged her expertise held a powerful appeal. What would such a role entail? She asked cautiously. Planning the menu with the cook, arranging the seating to facilitate meaningful conversations, perhaps displaying selected pieces from the collection that would interest the prince. Isaiah smiled. Activities well within your capabilities, I'd wager. And how would you introduce me? As your curator who happens to reside in your home, as a distant relation serving as your hostess. The explanation matters, Isaiah. He considered this thoughtfully. The truth, I think, that you are Lady Rosalind Lowell, an expert in textile arts with unique insights into cross-cultural aesthetics, who serves as both curator of my collection and advisor on cultural matters. Your residence here would be presented as a logical extension of our professional collaboration. It was a reasonable approach, yet Rosalind hesitated. Some will still draw their own conclusions. Some will always find reason to gossip, regardless of the facts before them, Isaiah pointed out. The question is whether we allow such small-mindedness to dictate our actions. His use of we rather than you struck Rosalind. It suggested a partnership, a shared purpose that transcended their formal arrangement. Very well, she said after a moment. I'll serve as your hostess for the royal visit, but I reserve the right to withdraw if the situation becomes uncomfortable. Of course, Isaiah's expression brightened. The event is a fortnight away. We have time to make preparations and ensure that everything reflects the cultural exchange we hope to facilitate. As they discussed the details of the gathering, Rosalind found herself drawn into Isaiah's enthusiasm for creating an event that would be more than mere social display. His vision was of an evening where East and West could meet in mutual appreciation, where art and knowledge would be valued above titles and wealth. It was an idealistic notion, perhaps, but one that resonated with Rosalind's own hopes for her new role. If she could no longer be part of conventional society, perhaps she could help create something better, a circle where merit mattered more than background, where beauty and understanding were valued above rigid adherence to tradition. The following days were filled with preparations for the royal visit. Rosalind worked closely with the household staff, selecting appropriate pieces from the collection for display, planning menus that incorporated subtle Chinese influences while remaining familiar to English palates, and arranging the public rooms to facilitate both formal presentations and informal conversations. Isaiah was equally engaged, corresponding with the royal household about specific interests the prince might have, researching historical connections between British and Chinese art traditions, and commissioning special printing of informational cards to accompany the displayed items. Their collaboration was seamless, each bringing complementary skills to the preparations. Rosalind found herself enjoying the process more than she had anticipated, particularly the creative aspects of designing an experience that would engage and inform their distinguished guests. 10 days before the event, as they were finalizing the selection of textiles for display, Isaiah raised a delicate subject. "I've been thinking about your attire for the evening," he said, somewhat hesitantly. "Would you consider allowing me to commission a gown that reflects the cross-cultural theme of the gathering?" Rosalind looked up from the silk scroll she was examining. "What exactly do you have in mind?" "A design that incorporates elements of both English and Chinese fashion, perhaps a traditional English silhouette, but with fabric and embellishments that reference your Chinese heritage." He added quickly, not as costume or spectacle, but as a subtle artistic statement about cultural integration. The suggestion was unexpected but intriguing. "I've never publicly acknowledged my Chinese ancestry," she said slowly. "It was something my mother kept private, knowing how society might react." "Times are changing," Isaiah pointed out. "The Great Exhibition has created interest in global cultures. The Queen herself collects Chinese artifacts. And your mixed heritage is something to be celebrated, not concealed." Rosalind considered the idea. There was something appealing about embracing a part of herself that had been hidden for so long. Who would create such a gown? "I can't imagine Madame Lefebvre has experience with Chinese design elements. I know a tailor in Limehouse who specializes in adapting Eastern garments for Westerners," Isaiah suggested. "With your design guidance, he could create something truly unique." The prospect was both exciting and slightly intimidating. Such a gown would make a statement that could not be withdrawn, a public acknowledgement of her heritage that would forever alter how she was perceived. "I would need to design it carefully," she mused. "The balance would be critical, honoring both traditions without seeming theatrical." "Of course," Isaiah agreed. "The decision is entirely yours. I simply thought it might be meaningful, given the occasion and your unique position to bridge these cultural worlds." That night, Rosalind found herself sketching ideas for the gown, drawing inspiration from both her mother's memories of traditional Chinese women's attire and the current English fashion plates. The creative process awakened something within her, a connection to her mother's heritage that had been dormant for years. By morning, she had a design that satisfied her, a gown of deep crimson silk with an English silhouette, but featuring subtle Chinese elements, a mandarin collar, embroidered panels reminiscent of traditional robes, and sleeve treatments that echoed the flowing lines of Eastern garments. When she showed the sketch to Isaiah over breakfast, his expression of admiration was gratifying. "This is extraordinary," he said, studying the detailed drawing. "It honors both traditions while creating something entirely new. Rather like you yourself, if I may be so bold." The compliment brought a flush to Rosalind's cheeks. "If your tailor can execute it faithfully, I believe it would be appropriate for the occasion." "He can, with your guidance." Isaiah handed back the sketch with a smile. "Shall we visit his workshop today? Time is growing short, and such a creation will require multiple fittings." The visit to Mr. Chen's workshop in Limehouse proved fascinating for Rosalind. The elderly tailor, a distant relation of her mother's family as it turned out, greeted her with surprised recognition. "You have your mother's eyes," he said in accented English, studying her face intently. "She was much admired for her beauty and grace when she lived among our community before her marriage took her away." The connection to her mother's past was unexpected and moving. As they discussed the gown design, Mr. Chen offered insights into traditional symbolism and construction techniques that Rosalind incorporated into her concept. By the time they left the workshop, with measurements taken and fabric selected, Rosalind felt a sense of reclamation, as though a part of herself that had been set aside was being acknowledged and honored. "Thank you for suggesting this," she told Isaiah as their carriage made its way back to Grosvenor Square. "I've spent so long hiding aspects of myself to fit into English society. It feels liberating to embrace my complete identity." "You're fortunate to have such a rich dual heritage," Isaiah replied. "My own background is thoroughly English, though my years abroad have certainly shaped my perspective." "Your understanding of Chinese culture is remarkable for an Englishman," Rosalind observed. "Most who travel abroad return with souvenirs and stories, but little true comprehension of the societies they visited." "I made a deliberate effort to learn," Isaiah explained. "When I first arrived in Hong Kong as a young man, I realized that business success would depend on genuine cultural understanding, not merely superficial adaptations. I studied the language, lived among local communities when possible, and sought teachers who could explain the philosophies and traditions that shaped daily life." "That explains your collection," Rosalind said thoughtfully. "It's not assembled for mere display, but with real appreciation for the cultural significance of each piece." "Exactly." Isaiah's expression was animated, his passion for the subject evident. "These aren't curiosities to be gawked at, but expressions of a rich civilization with much to teach us, about art, philosophy, governance, even human relationships." His enthusiasm was contagious, and Rosalind found herself sharing observations about her mother's teachings that she had never before discussed with anyone. The carriage ride passed quickly in this engaging exchange, establishing yet another layer of connection between them. The days leading up to the royal visit were filled with activity. Rosalind attended multiple fittings for her gown, supervised the final arrangements for displaying selected textiles, and worked with the household staff to ensure every detail of the evening would be perfect. The waistcoat commission was completed 3 days before the event, a masterpiece of embroidery that integrated the dragon and phoenix motifs into a design that was bold yet appropriate for formal English society. When Isaiah tried it on for the final fitting, the effect was striking, the rich midnight blue silk providing a perfect backdrop for the gold and silver embroidery. "It's magnificent," he said, studying his reflection in the mirror. "Better than I could have imagined." "The fabric you provided deserved nothing less," Rosalind replied, pleased with his reaction. "The dragons are adapted from imperial court robes, but simplified to suit Western aesthetics." "The subtlety is what makes it extraordinary," Isaiah observed. "At first glance, it appears to be merely an unusually fine waistcoat. Only upon closer inspection does one see the Eastern influences." "That was my intention," Rosalind confirmed. "Cultural integration rather than imitation or appropriation." Their eyes met in the mirror, and something unspoken passed between them, a mutual recognition of shared values and understanding that transcended their formal arrangement. The evening before the royal visit, Rosalind was making final adjustments to her gown when a knock came at her door. She found Isaiah waiting outside, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Forgive the interruption," he said, "but there's something I'd like to discuss before tomorrow's events begin." Of course. She invited him into her sitting room, setting aside her sewing. Isaiah paced for a moment before speaking. "I realize that our arrangement began under unusual circumstances, a response to immediate threats rather than a carefully considered partnership. You made your decision under duress, with Lord Pembroke's harassment forcing your hand." Rosalind tensed, uncertain where this conversation was leading. "That's true, though I've had no cause to regret my decision." "I'm glad to hear it." He stopped pacing and faced her directly. "But I want to ensure that you don't feel obligated in any way beyond our formal agreement, particularly regarding tomorrow's gathering." "I don't understand." Isaiah ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty from a man usually so composed. "Some of the guests tomorrow will be powerful figures in London society. Their acceptance or rejection of your new role could have significant consequences for your future. I would not have you feel pressured to present a certain image or relationship to secure their approval." Realization dawned. "You're concerned that I might feel compelled to suggest a closer connection between us than actually exists, to legitimize my position in your household." "Yes." His amber eyes were intent on her face. "I want you to feel free to define our association however feels most comfortable to you. If you wish to emphasize the professional nature of our arrangement, I will support that completely." The consideration behind his words touched Rosalind deeply. Most men in his position would have been concerned with their own reputation, not hers. "Thank you for your consideration," she said softly, "but I've given this matter some thought already. The truth seems the wisest course, that I am both your curator and your friend, residing in your home for practical and professional reasons. Those who wish to insinuate more will do so regardless of how we present ourselves." "Friend," Isaiah repeated, a smile warming his features. "I'd like that very much, though I wasn't sure you viewed our relationship in those terms." "How could I not?" Rosalind replied honestly. "You've shown me nothing but kindness and respect from our first meeting. You've valued my knowledge, protected me from harm, and encouraged me to embrace aspects of myself I'd long suppressed. Those are the actions of a true friend." For a moment, something deeper than friendship flickered in Isaiah's expression, but he quickly composed himself. "Then we are agreed. Tomorrow we present ourselves as professional colleagues and friends, nothing more or less." "Agreed." Rosalind hesitated, then added, "though I admit to some nervousness about facing society again after so long in seclusion." "You'll outshine everyone present," Isaiah said, with quiet confidence. "Not only because of your beauty, which is considerable, but because of your intelligence, your artistic sensitivity, and your unique perspective. The prince will be fascinated, I assure you." The compliment brought warmth to her cheeks. "You have great faith in me." "With good reason." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. I've taken the liberty of having this delivered for tomorrow evening." He handed her a small velvet box. Inside, Rosalind found a pair of exquisite jade earrings, carved in the shape of phoenixes with tiny pearls dangling beneath them. "Isaiah, I couldn't possibly." "They belonged to a nobleman of the Qing court," he explained. "When I acquired them for my collection, I was told they symbolize feminine strength and renewal, the phoenix rising from ashes to even greater beauty. They seemed appropriate for the occasion." The symbolism was not lost on Rosalind. Like the mythical phoenix, she was attempting to rise from the ashes of her ruined reputation, transformed by adversity into something new and perhaps stronger. "Thank you," she said simply, closing her fingers around the precious gift. "I'll wear them with pride." After Isaiah departed, Rosalind found herself contemplating their conversation and the subtle shift it represented. By acknowledging friendship openly, they had moved beyond the formality of their initial arrangement into something more personal, yet still respectful of boundaries. The jade earrings, too, suggested a deepening of their connection, not a romantic overture precisely, but a gesture of genuine appreciation and understanding. The fact that Isaiah had chosen a symbol so perfectly aligned with her circumstances indicated how well he had come to know her over these weeks of close association. As she completed the final stitches on her gown, Rosalind allowed herself to acknowledge the growing warmth she felt toward Isaiah Montague. Not merely gratitude for his assistance or admiration for his intellect, but something more complex, a response to his integrity, his sensitivity, and the way he had consistently treated her with dignity when others had not. Whether such feelings were wise, given her vulnerable position and uncertain future, remained to be seen. But as she prepared for sleep, Rosalind found herself looking forward to the coming day with anticipation rather than dread, eager to stand beside Isaiah as his friend and colleague, presenting their shared vision of cultural exchange to an audience that might truly appreciate it. The day of the royal visit dawned bright and clear. Montague House hummed with activity as final preparations were made, from the arrangement of fresh flowers throughout the public rooms to the careful positioning of selected textiles for optimal viewing. Rosalind spent the morning overseeing these details, working alongside Mrs. Winters to ensure that everything met the exacting standards required for a royal visit. By mid-afternoon, she retired to her rooms to prepare herself for the evening ahead. Martha helped her dress with particular care, arranging her auburn hair in an elegant style that complemented both the English and Chinese elements of her gown. The dress itself exceeded Rosalind's expectations. Mr. Chen had executed her design perfectly, creating a garment that honored both traditions while appearing thoroughly modern and appropriate for the occasion. The deep crimson silk complemented her fair complexion, while the subtle embroidery in gold thread along the bodice and sleeves added richness without ostentation. The mandarin collar framed her face elegantly, and the flowing lines of the skirt created a graceful silhouette that combined the best elements of both cultural aesthetics. With trembling fingers, Rosalind fastened the jade phoenix earrings, their weight unfamiliar but pleasing against her neck. The final effect, when she studied herself in the mirror, was striking, neither wholly English nor Chinese, but a harmonious integration of both influences. "You look beautiful, my lady," Martha said softly, "like something out of a painting." "Thank you, Martha." Rosalind smoothed the silk of her skirts, fighting the nervousness that threatened to overcome her composure. "I only hope I can do justice to this gown and all it represents." "You will," Martha assured her. "Just be yourself, the lady who survived everything life has thrown at her with grace and dignity." Rosalind descended to the main floor at precisely 7 o'clock, half an hour before the first guests were expected to arrive. She found Isaiah waiting at the foot of the stairs, resplendent in formal evening attire with the embroidered waistcoat as the centerpiece of his ensemble. His expression as he watched her descend was one Rosalind would remember for years to come, a look of such genuine admiration and respect that it banished her nervousness in an instant. "Rosalind," he said when she reached him, taking her gloved hand in his, "you are magnificent." "As are you," she replied, noting how the waistcoat's colors complemented his unusual amber eyes. "We make quite the matched pair, I think." "Indeed we do." He offered his arm. "Shall we make a final inspection of the arrangements before our guests arrive?" Together they moved through the house, reviewing each display and discussing how they would guide the conversation throughout the evening. Their easy rapport and shared excitement created a bubble of anticipation that kept Rosalind's anxiety at bay. The first guests began arriving precisely at 7:30, diplomats from the Foreign Office, scholars from Oxford and Cambridge, artists and collectors interested in Oriental culture. Each was greeted warmly by Isaiah and introduced to Rosalind with careful emphasis on her expertise and role as curator. To her surprise and relief, these initial introductions proceeded without awkwardness. The guests, selected for their intellectual interests rather than social connections, responded to her knowledge of the collection rather than to gossip about her past. Several engaged her in thoughtful conversations about specific textiles or techniques, treating her as a respected authority. At 8 o'clock precisely, a royal equerry arrived to announce that Prince Albert's carriage was approaching. Isaiah positioned himself at the entrance with Rosalind slightly behind him, as protocol demanded for receiving royalty. The prince consort entered with minimal ceremony, accompanied only by 2 aides. Tall, handsome, and possessed of the quiet dignity that had earned him the respect of the British people, Prince Albert greeted Isaiah warmly. "Mr. Montague, a pleasure to see you again. I've been looking forward to this evening since our discussion at the Royal Society." "The honor is ours, Your Royal Highness," Isaiah replied with a formal bow. "May I present Lady Rosalind Lowell, curator of my textile collection and an expert in cross-cultural artistic traditions." The prince turned to Rosalind, who executed a deep curtsy. "Lady Lowell," he acknowledged with a slight German accent. "Mr. Montague speaks highly of your expertise. I understand you have a personal connection to Chinese artistic traditions." "Yes, Your Royal Highness," Rosalind replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My mother was half Chinese, and I was fortunate to learn traditional techniques directly from her." "Fascinating," the prince said with genuine interest. "The Queen has a particular appreciation for cultural exchange. She will be most interested to hear about your work. Now, I understand there are some exceptional examples of imperial textiles to be viewed." The evening proceeded with remarkable smoothness after this auspicious beginning. Rosalind found herself guiding Prince Albert through the displayed collection, explaining the significance of various pieces and answering his informed questions about techniques and cultural contexts. The prince proved to be as intellectually curious as his reputation suggested, expressing particular interest in the educational possibilities of such cultural exchanges. "We must do more to promote understanding between East and West," he commented as they examined a particularly fine example of court embroidery. "Art and culture provide bridges where politics often fails." "Don't you agree, Lady Lowell?" "Absolutely, Your Royal Highness," Rosalind replied. "Beauty speaks a universal language that transcends national boundaries and prejudices." "Well put," the prince nodded approvingly. "And your gown is a perfect example of such integration, honoring both traditions while creating something new and distinctly beautiful." The royal compliment, delivered in the hearing of several guests, effectively established Rosalind's legitimacy in a way that no amount of explanation or defense could have accomplished. Throughout the remainder of the evening, she observed a subtle shift in how the other guests engaged with her, a deference and respect that had been tentative before now became assured. Dinner was served at 9:30, with the prince seated at the head of the table and Rosalind, as hostess, at the foot. The conversation flowed easily, touching on topics from international trade to philosophical differences between Eastern and Western approaches to art and beauty. Isaiah, seated to the prince's right, guided the discussion with the skill of a natural diplomat, ensuring that all guests had opportunities to contribute while maintaining focus on the cultural themes of the evening. From her position, Rosalind could observe him clearly. His animation when discussing ideas that mattered to him, his attentiveness to others' contributions, his subtle steering of the conversation away from potentially divisive political topics. She found herself increasingly aware of his many admirable qualities, not least his ability to create an atmosphere where diverse perspectives were valued. As the evening progressed, Rosalind noticed Isaiah watching her as well, his amber eyes warming whenever their gazes met across the table. There was pride in his expression, not possessive or condescending, but the genuine pleasure of seeing someone he respected succeeding in a challenging role. By the time Prince Albert departed shortly before midnight, with warm thanks and an expression of interest in future collaborations, the evening could only be deemed an unqualified success. The remaining guests lingered briefly, offering congratulations to both Isaiah and Rosalind for a memorable gathering, before taking their leave. When the last carriage had departed, Rosalind found herself alone with Isaiah in the now quiet drawing room, the excitement of the evening still humming through her veins. "We did it," she said, a smile of genuine delight lighting her features. "Everything went perfectly." "Beyond perfectly," Isaiah agreed, loosening his cravat slightly. The prince was thoroughly engaged, the conversations were substantive, and you, he paused, his gaze warm as it rested on her. "You were extraordinary, Rosalind. Every guest in this room tonight saw what I have seen since we met, your intelligence, your grace, your unique perspective on the world." His praise, offered without flattery or exaggeration, touched her deeply. "It was a team effort," she demurred. "Your vision for the evening, your collection, your insights, all created the foundation for success." "Perhaps," he acknowledged, "but it was your presence that transformed a mere exhibition into something meaningful. The way you explained the cultural significance of each piece, the personal connections you drew to your own heritage, these brought the collection to life in ways I could never have achieved alone." Rosalind felt a flush rise to her cheeks at his earnest praise. "Then I'm glad our paths crossed, unusual though the circumstances may have been." "As am I." Isaiah moved to the sideboard and poured 2 small glasses of sherry. Offering one to Rosalind, he raised his in a toast. "To unexpected partnerships and new beginnings." "To partnerships and beginnings," she echoed, touching her glass to his. As they sipped the sweet wine in companionable silence, Rosalind felt a curious sense of completion, as though the events of the evening had closed one chapter of her life and opened another. The woman who had hidden behind a veil as the silk shadow, afraid to claim her identity or heritage, had been replaced by someone newer and stronger, someone who could stand proudly as both Lady Rosalind Lowell and the daughter of Helena Chen, embracing all aspects of herself without shame or concealment. And Isaiah Montague had been instrumental in that transformation, not by changing her, but by creating circumstances where she could rediscover herself. The realization brought with it another, more unsettling awareness. Her feelings for Isaiah had evolved far beyond gratitude or professional respect. Somewhere amidst their shared work and conversations, their mutual appreciation of beauty and cultural exchange, something deeper had taken root, something that made her heart quicken when he entered a room and her spirit lift when he spoke her name. Such feelings were dangerous, she knew. Isaiah had been clear about respecting boundaries in their arrangement. He had offered friendship openly, but nothing more. To mistake his kindness and admiration for romantic interest would be folly of the highest order, potentially destroying the sanctuary and purpose she had found in his household. So Rosalind said nothing of her realization, maintaining the easy camaraderie they had established as she bid him good night and retired to her rooms. But as she removed the jade phoenix earrings and carefully placed them in their velvet box, she could not help wondering whether Isaiah might someday see her as more than a friend and colleague, and whether such a development would be wonderful or disastrous, given their unusual circumstances. The days following the royal visit brought a flurry of positive consequences. Letters arrived from several guests, expressing appreciation for the evening and interest in further discussions about the collection. The most significant communication came from Prince Albert himself, a formal letter expressing the royal couple's interest in having selected pieces from the collection displayed at an upcoming exhibition at Buckingham Palace. "This is extraordinary," Rosalind exclaimed when Isaiah showed her the letter over breakfast. "Royal patronage is the highest possible endorsement." "Indeed," Isaiah agreed, his expression pleased but thoughtful. It also presents us with new responsibilities and opportunities. The prince specifically mentions your expertise as a valuable resource for the exhibition. He suggests you might assist in selecting appropriate pieces and providing cultural context. Rosalind blinked in surprise. Me, working directly with the royal household. Why not? Isaiah's smile was warm. You impress the prince with your knowledge and your unique perspective. This is recognition of your expertise, Rosalind, pure and simple. The compliment pleased her, but practical concerns arose immediately. Such work would require frequent visits to the palace, meetings with royal staff, perhaps even direct interactions with the Queen. My reputation has been significantly rehabilitated by the prince's approval, Isaiah pointed out. When royalty extends favor, society tends to follow. Besides, this would be a professional engagement, focused on your expertise rather than your personal history. Rosalind wasn't entirely convinced. Some doors, once closed, remain sealed regardless of royal endorsement. Perhaps, Isaiah acknowledged, but this opportunity allows you to establish a new identity, not as a scandalous figure from the past, but as a respected authority on cultural arts with unique qualifications. The question is whether you're willing to step into that role, despite the inevitable scrutiny it will bring. It was a fair question, and one that required careful consideration. The safety of anonymity had become comfortable over the past months. Stepping into a public role, even one validated by royal approval, would mean exposing herself to potential criticism and renewed gossip. Yet the prospect was undeniably enticing. To contribute meaningfully to cultural understanding, to see her expertise valued at the highest levels of society, to reclaim a public identity on her own terms. These possibilities stirred something within her that had been dormant since her disgrace. I need time to consider, she said finally. This isn't a decision to be made hastily. Of course, Isaiah agreed. The exhibition is planned for the autumn, so there's no immediate rush. Take whatever time you need. The conversation shifted to more immediate matters, but the question lingered in Rosalind's mind throughout the day as she worked in the textile room, carefully documenting a collection of ceremonial banners. That evening, as she sat in the library reading while Isaiah attended to correspondence at his desk, a different sort of letter arrived, one that would complicate her decision considerably. Odd, Isaiah remarked, examining the envelope that had been delivered on a silver tray. It's addressed to both of us. Rosalind looked up from her book. Both, who would write to us jointly. Isaiah broke the seal and unfolded the letter, his expression darkening as he read its contents. Without comment, he handed it to Rosalind. Mr. Montague and Lady Lowell, the letter began in an elegant feminine hand. I write to extend my sincere congratulations on the success of your recent cultural soiree with Prince Albert. Word of the event has spread throughout London society, creating considerable interest in both your remarkable collection and your unusual partnership. As patroness of the annual Midsummer Charity Ball for the Foundling Hospital, I would be most pleased if you would both attend as my special guests. The event takes place at Northumberland House on the 24th of June and proceeds benefit children without families or protection, a cause I'm certain would appeal to your evident humanitarian sensibilities. Your presence would add significant luster to our gathering, particularly following the royal endorsement you've recently received. I assure you that you will be received with all the courtesy and respect your positions warrant. With anticipation of your favorable response. Lady Elena Beckford, Countess of Strathmere. Rosalind set the letter down slowly, her mind racing. Lady Beckford was one of London society's most influential hostesses, a woman whose approval could open doors that had been firmly closed to Rosalind since her disgrace. The invitation represented a potential return to respectable society, albeit under the unusual circumstances of her association with Isaiah. "This is unexpected," she said finally, struggling to sort through her conflicting emotions. "Indeed." Isaiah's tone was neutral, but his expression suggested wariness. "Lady Beckford is not known for impulsive gestures. This invitation is calculated." "But to what end?" Rosalind wondered aloud. "Is it genuine acceptance, curiosity about our arrangement, or simply an attempt to capitalize on the royal connection?" "Likely all three," Isaiah replied. "The question is whether we wish to accept, regardless of her motives." The use of "we," rather than "you," didn't escape Rosalind's notice. Isaiah was making it clear that this decision affected them both, that their reputations and social positions were now intertwined, for better or worse. "What are your thoughts?" she asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. Isaiah considered for a moment before responding. "I see both potential benefits and risks. Attendance would publicly establish your rehabilitation in society's eyes, particularly if Lady Beckford receives you warmly. It would align with the royal patronage and potentially open doors for future cultural initiatives." "And the risks?" "Scrutiny, certainly. Speculation about the nature of our relationship, perhaps attempts to drive a wedge between us by those who disapprove of our arrangement." He looked at her directly. "Some might attempt to undermine your confidence or suggest improper motives for my support of your work." Rosalind nodded slowly, appreciating his candor. "All valid concerns. Yet I wonder if declining would send an equally problematic message, suggesting we have something to hide or that we fear society's judgment." An astute observation, a hint of a smile touched Isaiah's lips. "You've developed a diplomat's instincts during our association." "Necessity is an effective teacher," Rosalind replied with a small smile of her own. "So we're agreed that we should accept. If you're comfortable with the scrutiny it will entail, yes." Isaiah's gaze was serious now. "But I want you to consider carefully, Rosalind. This represents a significant step from private recovery to public re-emergence. Are you prepared for the attention, both positive and negative, that will follow?" The question gave her pause. Was she ready to face society again, not as a shadow, but as herself? Complicated heritage, scandalous past, and all. The safe option would be to remain in the sanctuary Isaiah had created, continuing their work together in relative privacy. Yet something within her rebelled at the thought of shrinking from this opportunity. She had spent months reclaiming her identity and talents. The royal visit had proven she could hold her own in sophisticated company. Perhaps it was time to test those newfound strengths in a broader arena. "Yes," she said with quiet certainty, "I believe I am ready. Not because I seek society's approval, but because I no longer fear its disapproval. My worth isn't determined by drawing-room gossip or social acceptance." Pride flickered in Isaiah's amber eyes. "Well said. Then we shall accept Lady Beckford's invitation, as colleagues and friends with nothing to hide and much to contribute." As he drafted their response, Rosalind found herself contemplating the path that had led her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been hiding behind a veil, her talents concealed, her heritage denied, her future uncertain. Now she was preparing to attend one of London's premier social events as the respected curator of a collection that had earned royal patronage. The transformation was remarkable, and she owed much of it to the man seated across from her, a man who had seen value in her when others saw only scandal, who had offered respect when others offered judgment or exploitation. Her feelings for Isaiah had only deepened during their weeks of close association, evolving from cautious gratitude to profound admiration and something more complex that she dared not name, even to herself. Yet she had maintained careful boundaries, aware that acknowledging such emotions could jeopardize the partnership they had built. Now, with their public appearance at the charity ball looming, those boundaries would be tested. Society would watch their every interaction, seeking evidence to confirm their assumptions about the nature of the unusual partnership Lady Beckford had referenced in her invitation. Rosalind and Isaiah would need to present a united front while navigating the delicate balance between appropriate collegiality and the deeper connection that had formed between them. It would require all their combined diplomatic skills and mutual trust, a challenge that both excited and unnerved her as she contemplated the weeks ahead. The days leading up to the midsummer charity ball were filled with practical preparations. Rosalind required a new gown appropriate for such a significant social event, while Isaiah arranged for their formal acceptance by Lady Beckford and made discreet inquiries about the guest list and seating arrangements. Mr. Chen created another masterpiece for Rosalind, this time a ball gown in shimmering silk of deepest midnight blue, embroidered with silver thread in a pattern that subtly incorporated both English floral motifs and Chinese cloud designs. The bodice was modestly cut by current fashion standards, but beautifully structured to complement Rosalind's slender figure, while the full skirt was designed for dancing, with layers of tulle beneath the silk to create a floating effect when she moved. "It's perfect," Rosalind said at the final fitting, turning to observe how the silk caught the light. "Elegant without being ostentatious, distinctive without being theatrical." "It suits your new position," Mr. Chen observed with a smile. "Neither hiding your heritage nor flaunting it, simply incorporating it naturally into your presence." The observation struck Rosalind as particularly apt. She was no longer the disgraced Lady Lowell desperately concealing herself behind a veil, nor was she making a deliberate statement about her mixed ancestry. She was simply herself, a woman whose identity encompassed multiple cultural influences and experiences, comfortable with the complexity that entailed. Isaiah had been equally thoughtful about his own attire for the event, commissioning a formal suit that complemented Rosalind's gown without creating an overly matched appearance that might suggest a romantic connection. His waistcoat, while elegant, was deliberately less elaborately embroidered than the one he had worn for the royal visit, a subtle indication that they were attending as respected professionals rather than exotic curiosities. These practical preparations were interspersed with more strategic discussions about how they would navigate the social dynamics of the ball. Isaiah shared the information his discreet inquiries had yielded. Lady Beckford had placed them at her own table, a significant honor that suggested genuine interest rather than mere exploitation of their royal connection. The guest list included several of Rosalind's former acquaintances from before her disgrace, as well as key figures from diplomatic and cultural circles who might further their work with the royal exhibition. "Lord Pembroke will not be present," Isaiah assured her during one such discussion. "My inquiries confirm that he and his wife are currently in Bath, where she is taking the waters for her health." The news was a relief to Rosalind, who had been concerned about a potential confrontation. "And my cousin, Edward." Invited but not expected to attend. He apparently expressed some displeasure about Lady Beckford's decision to include us among her guests. Rosalind nodded, unsurprised by her cousin's continued disapproval. "And how shall we respond to inevitable questions about our arrangement?" "With simple truth," Isaiah replied. "You are the curator of my collection, valued for your expertise and cultural insights. Your residence in my household facilitates our collaborative work on the royal exhibition and other scholarly projects. There is nothing improper or mysterious about our association." "And if someone implies otherwise," Rosalind pressed, knowing how quickly innuendo could spread in society gatherings. "Then we respond with dignity rather than defensiveness," Isaiah said firmly. "Remember, Rosalind, we have nothing to hide or apologize for. Our work has earned royal patronage. Our collaboration is based on mutual respect and shared goals. Those who wish to see something scandalous will do so regardless of how we present ourselves." His confidence bolstered her own, though though lingering anxiety remained. Not about facing society's judgment. She had grown beyond that particular fear, but about maintaining the careful balance in her relationship with Isaiah while under intense scrutiny. The evening of the ball arrived with a perfect June sky fading into twilight as their carriage approached Northumberland House. The magnificent ducal residence was ablaze with light, its courtyard filled with elegant carriages disgorging London's elite in their formal finery. "Are you ready?" Isaiah asked quietly as their carriage joined the queue. Rosalind took a steadying breath, adjusting her gloves. "Yes, whatever happens tonight, we face it together." He reached across to squeeze her hand, briefly. "Together," he agreed. When they were announced at the entrance to the ballroom, Mr. Isaiah Montague and Lady Rosalind Lowell. Rosalind felt the momentary hush that fell over the nearby conversations, the subtle shifting of attention toward them. She kept her head high, her expression composed, as Isaiah offered his arm and guided her into the glittering assembly. Lady Beckford approached immediately, a tall, imposing woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a practiced social smile. "Mr. Montague, Lady Lowell, how delightful that you could join us." Prince Albert spoke most enthusiastically about your cultural soiree. "You're very kind to include us, Lady Beckford," Isaiah replied smoothly. "The work of the Foundling Hospital is most admirable." "Indeed it is." The Countess's gaze moved to Rosalind, assessing her appearance with the practiced eye of a social arbiter. "Lady Lowell, your gown is extraordinary. Not what one typically sees in London ballrooms, but quite striking. Is it a Chinese design?" "An integration of traditions, my lady," Rosalind replied calmly. "Much like the textiles in Mr. Montague's collection that will be featured in the Royal Exhibition this autumn." "How fascinating." Lady Beckford's tone suggested genuine interest beneath the social niceties. "You must tell me more about this exhibition as we dine. For now, allow me to introduce you to some of our other guests. The Belgian ambassador has expressed particular interest in meeting you both." What followed was a carefully choreographed progression through the ballroom, with Lady Beckford personally introducing them to selected guests of significance. Rosalind noted that these introductions emphasized their cultural work and royal connections, rather than addressing the circumstances of her past disgrace or current living arrangement. A diplomatic approach that allowed all parties to maintain dignified interactions. Some faces from Rosalind's former social circle appeared in the crowd, regarding her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disapproval. Yet Lady Beckford's explicit patronage created a shield that prevented open snubs or cutting remarks. Whatever private judgments might be formed, public courtesy was maintained. By the time they were seated for dinner, Rosalind had begun to relax slightly, finding her diplomatic footing in these social waters that had once been familiar but now felt subtly altered. Isaiah remained close at hand, his presence reassuring without being possessive, his conversations with their tablemates smoothly including her when appropriate. "Tell me, Lady Lowell," the Belgian ambassador inquired over the soup course, "how did you develop your expertise in Oriental textiles?" "It's an unusual field of study for an English nobleman." The question was asked with genuine interest rather than implied criticism, and Rosalind responded openly. "My mother was half Chinese, Your Excellency. She taught me traditional embroidery techniques from childhood, along with stories of the cultural significance behind different motifs and patterns." "Fascinating," the ambassador replied, his expression thoughtful. "So you navigate between worlds, in a sense, understanding both Eastern and Western perspectives on art and beauty." "Precisely," Isaiah interjected smoothly. "Lady Lowell's unique background makes her invaluable in interpreting the collection for Western audiences while honoring its Eastern origins. Prince Albert was particularly impressed by this aspect of our work." The conversation flowed easily from there, touching on topics from international trade to educational exchange. with Rosalind contributing confidently to discussions that would have been considered well beyond a lady's proper sphere in most society gatherings. She noticed Lady Beckford watching these exchanges with evident approval, occasionally steering the conversation to highlight Rosalind's knowledge or insights. After dinner came dancing, a moment Rosalind had been both anticipating and dreading. Would anyone request her hand for a set, or would she face the humiliation of being overlooked despite Lady Beckford's patronage? Her concern proved unfounded. Isaiah claimed her for the first set, a dignified quadrille that allowed them to converse briefly as they moved through the figures of the dance. "You're doing splendidly," he murmured during one such moment. "Lady Beckford is thoroughly charmed by your knowledge and composure." "And you're being impossibly gallant," Rosalind replied with a small smile. "Thank you for not leaving me to face the vultures alone." "I would never," he said simply, his amber eyes warm as they met hers before the dance separated them again. To Rosalind's surprise, the Belgian ambassador requested the next dance, followed by a distinguished professor from Oxford who had been seated at their dinner table. By the time the evening was half over, she had danced several sets with various gentlemen of intellectual or diplomatic standing, all of whom treated her with perfect courtesy. During a brief respite, as she stood with Isaiah watching the dancers, Lady Beckford approached them once more. "You've made quite an impression, Lady Lowell," the Countess observed. "I've received no fewer than 3 inquiries about your availability for cultural consultations. It seems Prince Albert's endorsement carries significant weight, even among those who might otherwise hesitate to associate with." She paused delicately. "With a woman of questionable reputation," Rosalind finished for her, keeping her tone light despite the pointed reference. Lady Beckford's lips quirked in appreciation of her directness. "Precisely. Though I must say, having observed you this evening, I find the gossip surrounding your circumstances most exaggerated. You comport yourself with admirable dignity. Lady Lowell's personal qualities have never been in question among those who know her," Isaiah said smoothly. "Only her circumstances have changed." "Indeed," the Countess's shrewd gaze moved between them. "And speaking of circumstances, I must commend you both on the discretion with which you manage your association. Others in similar situations might be less careful of appearances." The implication was clear. Lady Beckford assumed they were lovers, maintaining a respectable facade, and she approved of their tact rather than the presumed relationship itself. Rosalind felt heat rise to her cheeks, but before she could formulate a response that neither confirmed nor denied the assumption, Isaiah spoke. "Lady Beckford, you do us both an injustice," he said quietly but firmly. "Lady Lowell is my colleague and my friend. Her residence in my household is a matter of professional convenience and mutual respect, nothing more. I value her expertise and her character far too highly to compromise either with improper advances." The Countess's eyebrows rose slightly, genuine surprise crossing her features before she composed herself. "I see. Forgive me for presuming otherwise. It's rare to find such a platonic arrangement between an unmarried gentleman and lady. Rare, perhaps, but not impossible for those who value intellect and character above social conventions," Isaiah replied, his tone still perfectly courteous despite the underlying firmness. Lady Beckford studied him for a moment, then turned to Rosalind with newfound respect in her gaze. "You are fortunate in your patron, Lady Lowell. Not many men would defend a lady's honor at potential cost to their own reputation." "I'm well aware of Mr. Montague's exceptional character, my lady," Rosalind responded, her voice steady despite the emotion Isaiah's words had stirred within her. "It's one of many reasons our professional collaboration has proven so successful." The conversation moved to safer topics after that exchange, but Rosalind remained acutely conscious of what had transpired. Isaiah had publicly refuted the assumption of impropriety between them, even though accepting such assumptions might have been easier for a man of his position. He had chosen truth over convenience, respect over expedience. The gesture touched her deeply, yet it also highlighted the complexity of their situation. His defense emphasized the professional nature of their relationship, effectively closing the door on any possibility of a more personal connection. While part of her appreciated this clear boundary, another part, one she had tried to suppress, felt a pang of regret at such definitive categorization. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of social interactions, each carefully navigated with the diplomatic skills Rosalind had been honing since her association with Isaiah began. By the time their carriage departed Northumberland House shortly after midnight, she was physically exhausted but mentally exhilarated by the successful navigation of her return to society. "You were magnificent," Isaiah said as they settled into the privacy of the carriage. "Every person who spoke with you tonight left with increased respect for your knowledge and composure." "It was easier than I expected," Rosalind admitted, removing her gloves with a sigh of relief. Lady Beckford's patronage created a shield against the worst potential slights. Her support was instrumental, certainly, but it was your own qualities that won genuine respect. Isaiah's expression was warm in the dim light of the carriage lamps. "I was proud to stand beside you tonight, Rosalind." The sincerity in his voice created a flutter in her chest that she struggled to ignore. "Thank you for your defense," when Lady Beckford implied. "What she did." A shadow crossed his features. "I couldn't allow such assumptions to go unchallenged. Your reputation has suffered enough without adding fuel to unfounded speculation." "It was kind of you," Rosalind said softly, "though perhaps unnecessary." Lady Beckford clearly approved of our supposed arrangement, discreet as she believed it to be. "Her approval or disapproval is immaterial," Isaiah replied with unexpected vehemence. "What matters is the truth between us. I gave you my word when our arrangement began that I would never press my advantage or make improper advances. I intend to honor that promise, regardless of what society may assume." The firmness of his statement, while honorable, created a curious hollowness in Rosalind's chest. He was reaffirming the boundaries between them, boundaries she had once been grateful for, but now found herself wishing were more permeable. "You're a man of integrity, Isaiah," she said after a moment. "It's a quality too rare in London society." "As is your resilience," he countered, his expression softening. "Few women could have faced tonight's scrutiny with such grace after all you've endured." The rest of the journey passed in companionable conversation about the evening's events, with both carefully avoiding any return to the more personal territory they had briefly entered. By the time they reached Montague House, the easy professional rapport that characterized their daily interactions had been re-established. Yet as Rosalind prepared for bed that night, removing the elaborate gown and letting down her hair, she found herself contemplating the curious position in which she now found herself. Her public re-emergence had been a success, her professional future looked increasingly promising, and her place in Isaiah's household was now established, with a degree of social acceptance she had not thought possible. But these external successes could not entirely distract from the internal conflict that grew stronger each day. Her deepening feelings for Isaiah Montague and the increasingly painful awareness that he viewed their relationship as strictly professional and platonic. Or did he? There had been moments throughout their association, fleeting expressions, lingering glances, small gestures of consideration beyond what mere professionalism required, that suggested Isaiah might harbor feelings beyond friendship and collegial respect. Yet he had consistently maintained the boundaries they had established at the outset, never overstepping even when opportunities arose. Was this restraint born of genuine disinterest, as his words to Lady Beckford suggested? Or was it the honorable adherence to a promise made when their circumstances had been very different? Rosalind had no way to know without risking the partnership and sanctuary that had become so precious to her. To express her growing feelings might create an awkwardness that would make their continued collaboration impossible. Worse, it might appear that she was offering affection in exchange for protection and position, the very assumption they had both worked to dispel. So she resolved to maintain the status quo, focusing on their shared work and the opportunities that now opened before them. If her heart sometimes ached when Isaiah smiled at her across the breakfast table, or when their hands brushed accidentally as they examined a textile together, she would simply endure it silently. The friendship and respect they shared were too valuable to jeopardize for what might be merely wishful thinking on her part. The weeks following the midsummer ball brought a flurry of activity related to the royal exhibition. Rosalind found herself making regular visits to Buckingham Palace, consulting with the royal household staff about the selection and display of textiles from Isaiah's collection. Prince Albert himself occasionally joined these consultations, his genuine interest in cultural exchange, creating a comfortable working relationship despite the formal setting. Isaiah accompanied her on some of these visits, but increasingly trusted her to represent their shared vision without his presence. This vote of confidence bolstered Rosalind's professional assurance, though she missed his companionship during the hours spent at the palace. Their success at Lady Beckford's ball had indeed opened doors that had previously been closed to Rosalind. Invitations arrived to cultural events, scholarly lectures, and even a few select social gatherings where her expertise was specifically requested. She accepted these selectively, always with Isaiah's accompaniment, carefully building a new identity as a respected cultural consultant rather than a former society beauty or scandalous figure. Their personal interactions remained warm but carefully bounded, each seemingly content with the friendship and professional respect they shared. If Rosalind sometimes caught Isaiah watching her with an expression that hinted at deeper emotions, or if he occasionally found reasons to touch her hand or stand closer than strictly necessary, neither acknowledged these moments aloud. The equilibrium of their arrangement might have continued indefinitely had fate not intervened in the form of an unexpected visitor to Montague House one rainy afternoon in late July. Rosalind was working in the textile room, cataloguing a recently acquired collection of silk paintings, when Mrs. Winters appeared at the door with an unusual expression of discomfort. "Forgive the interruption, my lady, but there's a gentleman asking to see Mr. Montague. He's quite insistent, though he refuses to give his name or state his business." "Isaiah is at his club meeting with the Oriental Society Committee," Rosalind replied, setting aside her notes. "Did you inform the gentleman he could return tomorrow?" "I did, my lady, but Mrs. Winters hesitated. "He asked specifically if you were in residence. When I confirmed that you were, he requested to speak with you in Mr. Montague's absence." Alarm flickered through Rosalind. Did he give any indication of his identity? "No, my lady, though he speaks with an accent, foreign, but not French or German. And he's dressed very finely, with an unusual jade ring on his right hand." The description triggered no recognition for Rosalind, yet something about the visitor's insistence and knowledge of her presence in the household raised her concerns. "Where have you shown him?" "The small receiving room, my lady. Thomas remains in attendance, as is proper." That was some reassurance at least. Thomas, the elderly butler, was a reliable presence who would ensure no impropriety occurred during the interview. "Very well," Rosalind decided after a moment's consideration. "I'll speak with him briefly. Please remain within call, Mrs. Winters." The housekeeper nodded, her expression still troubled as she led Rosalind to the receiving room. "The gentleman to see you, my lady," she announced formally before withdrawing, leaving Thomas standing discreetly by the door. The man who rose from his seat as Rosalind entered was perhaps 50 years of age, his features distinctly Asian, though his attire was impeccably English. He bowed with a formal grace that spoke of aristocratic upbringing. "Lady Rosalind Lowell," he said in accented but fluent English. I thank you for receiving me without prior introduction. I am Chen Weiling, cousin to your honored mother. Rosalind stared in shock, her composure momentarily deserting her. My mother's cousin, but how? Please be seated, he suggested gently, gesturing to a chair. I understand my arrival is unexpected. Your mother's family has long sought news of her and her child, but communications between our countries have been complicated. Still stunned, Rosalind sat, studying the man who claimed kinship with her. Now that he mentioned it, she could see something of her mother's features in the shape of his eyes and the high cheekbones that had been Helena's most striking characteristic. My mother passed away many years ago, she said finally, when I was 16. So we learned with great sadness. Chen Weiling's expression reflected genuine regret. News reached China only after considerable delay. By then, your father had also departed this life. We understand. Yes, Rosalind's mind raced with questions. Forgive me, sir, but how did you find me here? And why seek me out after all this time? The gentleman's expression became more serious. As to how I found you, your recent public appearances with Mr. Montague have not gone unnoticed in certain circles. The gown you wore to the royal gathering, with its distinctive Chinese elements, drew particular attention. There are few English noblewomen with Chinese ancestry, and fewer still with knowledge of our traditional arts. It made sense, Rosalind realized. Her decision to acknowledge her heritage publicly, though liberating, had made her identifiable to those with connections to her mother's family. As for why now, Chen Weiling continued, I bring news that concerns both your heritage and your future. Your maternal grandmother, Lady Chen Minghua, still lives in Shanghai. She is elderly now, but of sound mind. She has designated you as her heir. Her heir, Rosalind repeated, stunned by this revelation. But surely there are closer relatives, your own children, perhaps. I have 2 sons, yes, but Lady Chen's will is specific. The daughter of her daughter Helena is to inherit her personal estate, including significant holdings in silk production and trading companies. It is a considerable fortune, Lady Rosalind. The information was overwhelming. Not only did she have living relatives in China, a grandmother she had never met, but this unknown ancestor had named her as heir to what sounded like substantial wealth. Why would she choose me? We've never met. She knows nothing of my character or circumstances. Chen Weiling smiled slightly. On the contrary, Lady Chen has made it her business to learn all she could about you over the years, through various contacts and merchants traveling between our countries. She knows of your father's financial difficulties, of the scandal that damaged your social position, and of your recent association with Mr. Montague and his collection. The idea that her life had been observed from afar by an unknown relative was unsettling. And she still wishes me to inherit, despite knowing of my disgrace in English society. Lady Chen puts little stock in the social judgments of English aristocracy, her visitor replied with a hint of amusement. She values resilience, intelligence, and artistic sensitivity, qualities she believes you have demonstrated through your survival of adversity and your work with traditional textiles. Rosalind tried to absorb these revelations, her mind still reeling from the sudden connection to a family she had assumed lost to her forever. What exactly does this inheritance entail? Would I be required to travel to China? Eventually, yes, though not immediately. Lady Chen wishes to meet you before she departs this life, but her health remains relatively stable for now. Chen Weiling reached into his coat and withdrew a sealed document. This letter contains the formal notification of your inheritance and the conditions attached to it. I suggest you review it carefully before making any decisions. Rosalind accepted the document, noting the elaborate red seal that secured it. Thank you for bringing this to me personally. It must have been a long journey. I have business interests in London that required my attention in any case. he replied diplomatically. And I wish to see for myself the daughter of Helena, to bring personal news to Lady Chen. What will you tell her about me? Rosalind asked, suddenly concerned about the impression she had made. A genuine smile softened Chen Weiling's formal demeanor. That you have your